And just to remind members and the public to switch off mobile phones and electronic devices, all on the tablets provided by the Assembly for use with the electronic committee packs. Apologies, we have no apologies. Draft minutes. The draft minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of July are at page 4. Somebody has a mobile.
It's me, no apologies.
But you need to read this slide here.
It's horrible, isn't it?
Is it orange, Gordon, or what colour is it?
Is that the red light district?
All right, the draft minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of July 2014 are at page 4. So are members happy enough with the content and accuracy of those minutes? Agreed? Yep. Thank you. Chairperson's business papers for this are from page number 14 onwards. Okay. Now, first of all, just in relation to committee membership, I'd welcome Mr. Danny Kinahan to the committee, and also just on that point, we look forward to working with you, Danny.
Thank you.
It's a good committee. We get on well with one another and get things done. You know, I think maybe the executive could take an example from us. But anyway, and could we also thank Sandra for her contribution, and if members are content enough that we write a letter to Sandra commending her and thanking her for her contribution and work on the committee. Great. Now, declaration of interest. Under Standing Order 69.4, before taking part in any proceedings of the Assembly or its committees, a member must declare any interest, financial or otherwise, which is relevant to the debate or proceedings, or where such interest is held by a member or an immediate relative. Just to advise members, as this is the first meeting of the year and the committee has one new member, it's a timely point to remind committee members to declare any interest held by them which are relevant to the work of the committee. And table today is a copy of the register of interest for new member Danny. So I have to ask, has any member any interest to declare other than those previously declared to the committee? No?
Chair, can I just check? I've been in a couple of committees in the past where this has come up, and some people would say, look, I belong to that organisation, even though we're only in doing a presentation. So are there going to be guidelines on what you have to declare?
Oh yes, I'm sure.
Because I think every meeting we would have some sort of interest.
You want those, Sammy?
I've been helping, I think.
That's okay. Declare that we're all electricity customers, like. Now, how daft is the thing yet?
I know.
Yeah, that's
we can get those. As a matter of fact, we'll have those circulated. This is the guidance around declaration of interest by members. Okay, we'll get that circulated to members. Members' attendance, the next item. Information on members' attendance at committee meetings was emailed to members to advise, and just for members to advise the committee office by tomorrow if they believe that there are any inaccuracies in that list of attendance. Next item, committee visit to Titanic Quarter. Members received a very informative presentation on the Titanic Quarter project and an enlightening tour of the Titanic studios, although it maybe wasn't as enlightening as it could have been. It appears afterwards there were some problems with people having us as representatives of the public purse taking photographs of what the public purse was funding, which I found a bit unusual. But anyway, if we're content with that maybe we caveat, to write to David Gavigan, it was nothing whatsoever to do with them. It was the company. I'm sure you're all aware of it, got emails and all that sort of stuff about it. Could we write to David Gavigan, Titanic Quarter Limited Chief Executive, to thank him and Michael Graham, Director of Corporate Real Estate, for their hospitality and providing us for a meeting venue?
I was speaking to David Gavigan and about some of the stuff that was published on the internet. He says anybody who has posted a photograph on social media, the next time they go to Game of Thrones, they will be killed. So I'm just reporting my wits in.
Well, I was
withdraw that letter of thanks. And
he said he wouldn't have.
What we were doing was saying
sponsors and
what a wonderful job they were doing.
I've seen what way they killed.
They're not happy with those who represent the public person and doing a wonderful job, you know.
You've no idea how sinister that sounded. I just caught the last soundbite.
It's an unusual type of PR operation. But there you go. Yeah. Was it? The next item is Damien English TD. As members are aware, Damien English, the former chair of the Oireachtas Joint Committee on Jobs, Enterprise and Innovation, was appointed as Minister of State for Skills, Research and Innovation on the 15th of July 2014. Now, if members are content that we write to Mr English to congratulate him on his new position and appointment and to thank him for his input into the committee's visit to the Oireachtas last December. Indeed, he was very accommodating and hospitable on our visit down to Dublin on that occasion. So if we're content enough to write to him, that's a good appointment that he's got as well. Might be of use in helping us in some of our matters. Agree to do that, yes?
Great.
It mightn't be a bad idea if we could refresh, and I know maybe some of the committee members the committee staff have been doing this. The visit by the Oireachtas Committee on Skills, Research and Innovation. Have we any update on that, Jim?
Chair, I've been in touch with the clerk. It's still in the forward work programme, although they do want to hear from some of the stakeholders in the first instance, such as Intertrade Ireland, the Centre for Cross-Border Studies. So they want to get that out of the way. They're currently involved in something else at the minute, and when they've that done, they'll get on to that. So they've said that it is still in their forward work programme.
Okay, thank you.
Although obviously they do have a new chair now, so
that's right.
That'll take time to settle.
Okay, Deputy Senior Management, Dr Andrew McCormick has replaced David Sterling as Permanent Secretary and Deputy. At page 15 for members' information is a chart showing the current structure of Senior Management and Deputy. Dr McCormick has requested a meeting with myself and Phil as Chair and Vice Chair, and it's expected that a meeting is to be arranged for early October. I think we have a date tied down for that, haven't we, Angela? So if members are content to note that. Next item, Energia Group presentation. It's a copy of a presentation by Energia providing an overview of the business. That's at page 16. And a number of us did visit Energia on the 5th of August, and very informative visit, including some interesting things. They did provide to us information. They did provide to us about aspects of information that has been already provided to us. Quite interesting and refreshing to get a new take on it. So. Okay. Now, next item, Northern Ireland.
Can I just take you back to the Deputy Senior Management stuff?
Yes.
Looking at the way they break down the divisions within DET, it doesn't really make sense to me why they have a division called Tourism, Telecoms, and then GSNI. GSNI was responsible primarily for petroleum and mineral licence. Surely it would make more sense if that was within the Energy division. So can we ask the department if they've given any consideration to moving that GSNI in the Minerals division into Energy, where it might actually sit better, I suppose, in with Tourism and Telecoms?
It looks like a bit of an add-on there, doesn't it? Right. Agreed that we ask or query the department rationale on that. Okay. Next item, Northern Ireland Assembly and Business Trust. That's European Programme 2014. At page 36 is correspondence from the NIABT offering members the opportunity to participate in an educational visit to Brussels, taking place from Monday the 17th to Wednesday the 19th of November. Now, ask members if they wish to attend, they should contact Ivor Gibson directly at NIABT by Saturday the 11th of October. Now, we'll probably deal with this as well because it came up during our planning meeting. And some details are included here. It was in that same week, I think, there was a conference being organised around principally innovation, research, development, those aspects of the EU. Let's see, I'm trying to get it. It's included in your table of papers. With the Forward Work Programme, or under the issue of Forward Work Programme. Innovation Summit information. That's at page 28 on the table of papers. So I don't know if members have reflected any further on it, but I did look through it again last night. There's bits and pieces about innovation, about energy, about Horizon 2020. Again, innovation, research and innovation, agricultural innovation, the EU unlocking its full potential. And then there are sector specifics. There's the regions, powerhouses of innovation, research and innovation to economic value. It seems those broad themes are being dealt with there. So, anyway, that's for members to decide, do they feel it worthwhile spending I know both of these visits are in the 1 week. Do they feel it worthwhile attending as a follow-through on the work that we've done on the R&D and innovation and Horizon 2020 stuff? This particular conference,
Is there a cost for the summit itself, do you know, Patsy?
for which, Phil?
For attending the summit, is there a charge for it?
I honestly don't know. Can we find that out then?
Chair, the staff have been in touch with, they've emailed them to find out who the summit is aimed at, what it is hoped to get out of the summit and what costs are associated with it, so it might be preferable to defer a decision until
Until we've got that. Aye, that's okay. All right. On the Assembly and Business Trust one. No, yes, okay. Right. Northern Ireland Economic Conference 2014, at page 38, is information on the Northern Ireland Economic Conference 2014. That's on Tuesday, the 7th of October. This has been forwarded to members in their info, which is coincidentally the first day the committee meets on Tuesday instead of a Thursday, which we'll be discussing later on in our forward work programme. So, anyone interested in attending that? That's at page 38. There's a clash right immediately with our own.
Plenary day, like?
Also depends what's in the plenary.
Also, there's a charge there of 306 quid, including VAT. So
For value. Noted.
that's in the Culloden. You know, so
Very economical.
Serious.
I know.
Chair's
Okay,
is it delegate fees, is that 306 quid?
Aye, including VAT. So I think maybe we just
See that in a cafe.
okay.
Seamus is going there? Seamus is going there?
All right. Aye. Very good.
You're worth paying to see Seamus.
Right. Sure, we'll hear more from him after.
I can see him next for nothing.
Right. Okay, gentlemen and lady, can we move on then to, we've agreed to just park that 38 because it's going to clash. Next item, Action Renewables Innovation Technology Seminar. This is at page 40, an invite to the Committee for Action Renewables to an Innovation Technology Seminar being hosted with, in partnership with Belfast Health and Social Care Trust, Thursday the 9th of October at Knockbracken Healthcare Park. Quite a bit of it inevitably is at health issues and stuff, but there's an element of it there about smart meters and smart grid technology. So, given that it's a Thursday and we've rearranged our days, unless any member has a specific interest, maybe they're up here anyway, in going to it, would it be content enough to send someone from Assembly Research to attend and report back? Agreed. Okay, thank you. Now, agenda item number 4 is the oral briefing from the Northern Ireland Council for Voluntary Action on the report, a commentary on economic data in Northern Ireland. Papers are from page 42 onwards in your pack, and they include briefing paper from the Clerk at page 43, the report, a commentary on economic data in Northern Ireland, page 44, and before the committee today are Mr. Seamus McAlevey, Chief Executive of NICFA, and Mr. Michael Burke, who is an economic consultant and author of the report. You're both very welcome indeed, and thanks very much for attending, giving up your time to be with us. Read the report, so obviously members will have read the report as well. So you'll have your opening remarks, I presume it's yourself, first of all, Seamus, and then we'll have a Q&A session.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for the invitation to come along here today. We're delighted to do so. I have only a few opening remarks, which is just really to set this in context. As the members know, NICFA has been engaged in a variety of research on economic issues. The main focus for us is to try and find evidence that might point us in a direction that might find ways to improve the economic outlook in Northern Ireland, and we in NICFA have a strong interest in that. So we've carried out a series of reports. This is another one, and we thought it would be very useful to look at the situation with regard to the data that we gather in Northern Ireland. And if we're 2.7% or thereabouts of the UK population, I think clearly at UK terms, we fall within the bounds of the margin for error. So we want to look at about how much information we have locally, so as government can make the best possible choices in terms of the risks that it may take by changing. And that, I'd like to hand over to Michael in terms of some comments from him.
Thank you, Seamus, and thank you, Chair, and thanks to members of the committee for inviting me. I'm going to be speaking about a topic, one of the few topics that's widely regarded as less interesting than economics, which is statistics, speaking about them both, and therefore I thank the committee's patience in advance for speaking about these, but I think they're very important issues. I believe it was Alan Greenspan, former chairman of the Federal Reserve in America, who said that formulation of all economic policy, he was referring to monetary policy, but it's true for all economic policy, was like trying to drive a car through the rear-view mirror, i.e. you had to rely on information that had already taken place. The difficulty that one has in formulating economic policy if the data is incomplete, patchy or unreliable is that you're driving a car through the rear view mirror when some of the windows are blacked out. And I believe that to be the case currently in regard to Northern Ireland economic data. The report is broken down really into three sections, one of which deals with the difficulties and problems in relation to real economic data, i.e. economic activity, GDP, industrial production, retail sales, all the rest of it, all that type of economic data. The second section deals with the problems of data relating to government finances, which is both revenues and expenditure of government. And of course those two are related, given that government is the biggest single actor in any advanced economy. And then some recommendations for how that might be improved. And there's practice in the European Union where economies of similar size to this one have much more developed levels of economic data. And in my view, the best model of all would to be adopted would be the one that's adopted by the Scottish Government.
Okay, complete. All right, thanks very much for that. Read your report last night, and I have to compliment you individually on your work in highlighting this issue. Now, could you, basically, you stopped there at the point at which I was going to take over, and that is, what do you do about this? And what type of model? Can you give us some elaboration on the Scottish model, what it does and how it helps a situation where, and really from reading through your report, in terms of economic data, in terms of development of the economy, you're really anticipating that at the moment we're potentially stabbing in the dark, or stabbing in wherever. Can I just ask you, what is the Scottish model? How long has it been in place, and how is it delivering, as opposed to how potentially we're not delivering here?
Okay, that's a very detailed question, really in a number of parts, but I could deal with them. What I understand to be the two key things is, one, why is it important, and two, why is the Scottish one better, and in what way? Why is it important? Well, I've tried at least in the oral presentation, and as far as possible in the written report, to de-jargonise some of this. It's very difficult, of course, because it's replete with jargon, and there's an appendix at the back which helps, I hope, deal with some of that. But if I take one key example, there are no input-output tables for this economy in the north, and that's quite important. It's a bit arcane, but if someone, let's say unnamed, told this committee, you have a cheque for £100 million and you can spend this on economic development as you choose. As things currently stand, without proper GDP and input-output tables, you wouldn't, with the best will in the world, know how best to spend that. You might have good ideas, you might have great intuition, you've got no economic data on which to base that. Because what an input-output table does, for example, is it allows you to see in advance that if you pull a certain lever here, you get certain other things happening over there. You see the interrelationships of the various sectors of the economy. If you don't have that, you can't see it. So that's why the data itself is important. What the Scottish Government has done is it's provided Scotland with its own GDP data, which is not the case here. It's provided Scotland with their own input-output tables, which is not the case here. And it's provided a whole panoply of supplementary and subsidiary economic data so that it's possible to understand how the economy works. It doesn't provide a magic wand in terms of economic policy making, but at least you have an idea of what's happening. And that's been in place, I think, now for 4 or more years. And it really is a very good template with which to work in terms of formulating economic policy.
A good template, but what's the analysis, or maybe at this point in time you don't know, what's the analysis as to its outcome as opposed to its outcome now as opposed to before?
Well, its outcome now is that the elected representatives in Scotland understand that if they spend X amount of money on Y sector, there will be a given economic outcome, and they can monitor that. They can see that if we spend 100 million on developing airports, for example, it has this impact on the transport sector, on the engineering sector, on so on and so on the high-tech sector, because they've got the economic data to do so. And they do that. They produce a myriad of reports because those are the data are the essential building blocks for all economic analysis. Prior to that, it was guesswork. It was one-off reports, very costly, because people often talk about the costs of providing economic data to that high level, and there is a cost. There's no getting away from that. But absent that, you have a series of ad hoc, one-off reports, often, for the best will in the world, done by very highly paid private sector consultants who themselves can't rely on good economic data in the formulation of their recommendations. They're as much in the dark as anyone. They just maybe make more informed guesses.
Okay, thanks for that. Then, as it'll probably be given a bit of an added impetus depending on the outcome over in Scotland today, but corporation tax. The implications of corporation tax for the North here, obviously, where everybody's teasing that one out and thinking about that one. But how would the presence of finely tuned, informed economic data, such as the model that you're referring to, how would that assist with the potential, and it's arguable one way or another, the potential benefits of corporation tax being reduced?
That's a very good question, because it's quite extraordinary here that there's I know, quite long and sometimes heated discussion about corporation tax, whether it should be a devolved matter, and if so, what should be done with it, higher, lower, or something else. But if you look at the Treasury report, for example, and the Treasury is the primary source of all the data we have for public finances, and look at things like its report rebalancing the Northern Ireland economy, nowhere does it properly state what the revenues from corporation tax are that are generated here. What we know is that what's done on the basis of the reports so far is that corporation tax is allocated to the North on the basis of what's received centrally at Westminster. But we have the very strange anomaly that 2.1% of all national insurance contributions for the UK as a whole are from the North, but only 1.4% of the corporation taxes are. It's very odd. And there's a reason for that. That's because corporation taxes are paid by postcode. So very large companies operating here will pay their corporation tax based on where they're based. It may be London, it could be Manchester, it could be Liverpool, it could be anywhere. And that's the basis on which the corporation tax revenues are allocated. So we have a long and sometimes heated debate on what to do about corporation tax, but as matters stand, we don't actually know what the level of corporation tax raised in this economy actually is. So my first plea is that we should find out what we're talking about before we talk about it.
Can I just add to this, Chair? The last time that NICFA presented to this committee, it was on the report that we had done on fiscal powers, and which Chief Economist in PricewaterhouseCoopers, Esmond Barney, had carried out for us. And we saw a strong link, obviously, between the discussion on fiscal powers and this issue of data. And this was very much came out of that and was a follow-on part of that about trying to understand, from the data what might be best to do, because obviously we did some work on looking at a range of fiscal powers and try to figure out, or at least produce some evidence to show which might be to our benefit to develop. And certainly at that time, that's what drove this report then. You need to have the data to be able to make some of the judgments.
Okay, thanks for that. Phil, Mr. Flanagan.
Thanks, Patsy, and thanks for the presentation. It is a very useful report. In terms of good quality economic data, what impact does not having such data have on the local economy?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, there's really two effects. One is that in terms of economic policy making, you're pretty much flying blind. You don't actually know. You can make a stab at. Obviously, there are ways in which one might provide survey evidence and so on. Post factum, you might do decent guesswork prior to the fact. But the reality is that without the economic data, you can't possibly know what's really happening in the economy, and you can't possibly know what the impact of various policy decisions are. I should add at that point as well that there's a subsidiary but very important negative effect arising from the absence of proper fiscal data, which is that, as I said earlier, the government in any advanced economy is the biggest single actor. The private sector is generally bigger as a whole, but government is the biggest single one. So if you don't know what its revenues and expenditures are in the economy, you don't know what's happening from the biggest single actor in the economy. It's all tied together. One needs proper economic and fiscal data before you can know what's happening in the economy and what one should do about economic policy.
Now, you've referenced information on corporation tax and national insurance contributions, and you've also made reference to an input-output statement. What's the most significant weakness in economic data here?
Those are two. And to them, I would add the absence of GDP data. GDP being the all-embracing, all-encompassing measure of what's going on. But it's not just a measure, because in discussions, apparent with very friendly discussions with people in officialdom, they seem to be of the view that if you have things like the Northern Ireland Composite Economic Index, and it comes out as broadly the same thing as what one sort of guesstimates as GDP, that's good enough. Well, it's not, because you don't know the composition. If consumption is soaring away but investment is declining, that's going to lead you into a big problem. Because the two measures look to be equal, doesn't make either of them valid. A pint of beer is not equal to a pint of water or a pint of oil. There's a very different composition. They do very different things. And I would say that in terms of the data we have so far, things like the Northern Ireland Composite Economic Index, is that if that's true, if what that's showing is correct, then this economy is on a par with Greece in terms of how disastrous the current crisis is. I don't actually believe that to be the case. I think the crisis had a very negative impact, but I don't believe it's the same quantum of crisis, and therefore it calls into question the entire sort of usefulness of things like the Northern Ireland Composite Economic Index.
Right. And an awful lot of people come here and present problems, but it's solutions we're looking for. How do you propose we address it? What impact would this have on the local economy?
If you spend to invest, if you invest in proper economic data, you will be able to understand, firstly, what's happening in the economy, and two, what's the most cost-effective, most efficient way of improving it. The purpose of economic policy is, or ought to be, the sustainable increase in the living standards of the population. If you don't know what the living standards of the population are properly and what is affecting them and how they're evolving over time, then you can't possibly do that. So there is a cost in terms of raising proper economic data, but there are agencies to do that with. They exist already. The wheel doesn't have to be invented, it just has to be smoothed a bit. The ONS, it already exists, it already gathers data, just a little bit more money in terms of agencies like that could provide proper economic data on which policymakers and others could rely.
So it's not about giving people that sit in dark rooms for 12 hours a day looking through books and numbers more information. It's about giving policymakers and elected representatives better information upon which to make decisions that will change economic development here.
In my view, that's the ultimate purpose of providing economic data.
And have you any suggestions of how we enhance local economic data?
I would campaign for, or argue for, or committee members could lobby for significant additional resources to be provided to the statistical agencies so that they can provide proper economic data for this economy. That would be my recommendation.
And what kind of response have you been getting from the departments with responsibility for the economy on that matter?
My only dialogue with the departments is a roundtable organised by NICVA, and that was very constructive, I felt.
But have they been commenting on it, Seamus, since?
Maybe I could add to that. I mean, we kept very close to NISRA on this, and shared, Michael's drafts. And I think it's interesting, that NISRA during that dialogue and discussion have told us they're actually working on quite a number of these things. So they recognise the issues and have said that they're already beginning to look at how they might do some things and make the changes necessary. I didn't make the seminar, but all the feedback from the seminar, which involved NISRA and government statisticians and other commentators on the economy from the private sector, was that it was all very positive and people recognise the merits.
Okay, but has there been any response from DFP or DETI since then?
No, there's no official response, in terms of this to this report at this stage.
Okay, thanks, Phil.
Right, thanks, Phil. Megan, Miss Fearon.
Thanks to Michael and Seamus, and it's an interesting report. I think it's particularly concerning that there does appear to be large omissions in public finance data here, and we're effectively relying on guesswork. But a particular concern is the fact that we estimate VAT. It's a major revenue stream, and we estimate it on the basis of surveys on a number of small households, and those the returns of those surveys and those returns have to be aggregated over 3 years to get any kind of estimate, which is completely ridiculous. So do you have any suggestions on how we could improve that particular aspect of it?
Well, that's a very particular failing of the data, and that really comes down to, that goes to the point earlier about beefing up what's actually done here. If you have extremely small sample sizes, as is the case in the VAT returns, then you can't really rely on the data at all. Your degree of confidence is it's not quite zero, but it's very, very low in terms of the data. So you've done some survey work, but it's not very valuable. You really need to have proper sample sizes for all the data in order to have any degree of confidence behind it. And currently I wouldn't place any confidence in the VAT returns as currently surveyed and they're based on.
I just want to touch on the fiscal balance report that DFP produced. It won't be surprising that, in my view, it's not fit for purpose. It's inaccurate for a number of reasons, one of which is there's obviously key gaps, and the fact that we do rely on estimates for major revenue streams like VAT that I've mentioned and income tax. It's just to point out one particular feeling of last year's net fiscal balance report indicated that 12.7 billion was generated in 2010-2011, but in this year's report for the same time frame, it said that the figure was 13.5 billion, so DFP miraculously came up with almost £1 billion. So there's clear limitations with that, and do you have any suggestions on how we could replace that or improve it?
Yeah, I noted that myself. I mean, there's a general rule of thumb that's used in these things, is that rubbish in, rubbish out. You know, if your series of assumptions are very poor at the outset, don't be surprised if they're subject to massive revisions, uncertainties, or plain inaccuracy. And I think the net fiscal balance report, it really isn't. I would have to agree. I don't think it is fit for purpose. It's certainly not fit for the purpose that's often stated for it, which is that it's an accurate estimate of the revenues and expenditures that take place here, because there's no other source of fiscal data than the Treasury. Treasury provides all the data for all reports in relation to the fiscal side of the economy. And the Treasury makes clear in the PESA reports that it's what it calls its country and regional analysis aspect of them is a statistical construct, i.e. allocates portions of budgets regionally or nationally within the UK, which means that those expenditures don't necessarily take place there, and those revenues aren't necessarily raised there, or they may be more or less. So if you're trying to build something a bigger artifice on weak foundations, it's not surprising it occasionally comes crashing down around your ears.
Yeah, I think if DFP were able to come up with miraculously that kind of money where you're just redoing sums, they could probably solve all our problems. But just the final question is, do you have a view or an opinion on the complete absence of a departmental statement on the need for an accurate statement of revenue for the North? Because otherwise we are really relying on estimates and guesswork.
That's disappointing, obviously. You know, departments should have accurate data on which to make, which to base policy, in which to provide reports. If they haven't done that, then that's obviously something that I think the committee should take up.
Yeah, I think we should take it up. If you're responsible for the economy, you should at least want to have the accurate data in order to underpin your strategy. So that's me. Thank you, Chair. Thanks.
Okay, thanks for that. Mr. McKinney, Fergal.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your report. It's not the first time, actually, that the committee has heard about the absence of data. You probably remember the cross-border study where it talked about the absence of sub-regional data. So this is adding another layer, if you like, to all of that. I assume that, you know, the bones of this information lie somewhere because decisions are being made around it either by Treasury or other people. How long would it take to put in place some kind of structure to address the issue?
I'm not an expert on the workings of the Treasury. I do have contact with people who've worked there many years. I would assume it wouldn't take very much, actually, because as you rightly say, the likelihood is that some of the data is already present, it's already there. So a sweeping statement that no one knows this, I would avoid. It may be that it is known, but just not published or released. So I think that's something that's definitely worth investigating.
And I assume that, well, given earlier on people talked about no economic data, but I assume you want to get into a decent room for margin for error, even. In other words, if you can get into the zone as opposed to, you know, not on the field. So, you know, how big a job then is that? I mean, just to reaffirm, you're saying that it wouldn't take that much. The data, or the ingredients for the data, if that's not the right term, are there. So this might not take a lot.
It might not. I mean, I think that maybe you should follow up, not to make direct to the contact of the committee, but to people who've done this, i.e. the people in the Scottish Government and their statistical agents who've created this, and ask them what, you know, how the process works. But it's certainly the case that some of the data is there. And once you know that, then building on, it's not as if you have to invent the wheel. Building on that is not difficult a job. I'm certain that there would be additional cost, but it's always important to remember that there's a big additional benefit too.
I suppose the point I'm getting at is that people may try and put obstacles in your way around this by saying it's a big job, and et cetera, et cetera. So in that context, are there measurables in your mind, short term, medium term and long term, about how getting a bit of the information would achieve X, a bit more would achieve Y, and a bit more would achieve Z, if you like?
Yeah, I mean, as someone who sort of is nerdy enough to do all this for a living, I'd obviously want as much information as possible all the time. But I think the fact that one's dealing with, this economy generates just under £30 billion a year in value added. That's not an insignificant sum of money. The fact is, we don't know much about it. We weigh it. So if you think about that's the total quantum of what you're dealing with. The tiny amount of resources that are required to understand what's happening there are, infinitesimal by comparison. So, to your point, the investment in this is tiny compared to the potential payoff.
Okay, thanks very much indeed. And Chair, just a remark, given that, we're all under pressure, if you like, or including the public around monitoring rounds, and, despite the huge amounts of money that's swirled around, we're all now held hostage to 100 million here or 50 million there. It's probably ways to make sure we get as much data as possible. Thank you, Chair.
Just on the publication of a range of macroeconomic statistics for Scotland, that's done by the ONS, but there's nothing similar done for the north here. Is that what you're saying?
The ONS collects data here.
Yes.
But it doesn't collect all of the same data it does for the north, or if it does so, it doesn't do so in sufficient number relating to the point about sample sizes. Right. That there can be confidence behind specific Northern Ireland data.
Right. Okay, thanks for that. Mr. Frew, Paul.
Yeah, thank you. You cite the Scottish model as a best practice model, I suppose, that we could adopt. Do we have any estimations on how much it costs to implement in Scotland, and then how that would compare to adopting that system in Northern Ireland, considering the differences in population and scale as far as the economy?
I don't know the total cost, and that's partly informed my earlier suggestion to maybe get people in from the Scottish Government who are responsible for this. It's sometimes said that the provision of comparable data for Northern Ireland economy would require the same level of expenditure, but clearly because the economy is smaller, that's not actually true. And it should be noted that some of the data is already collected. It just needs expanding for sample size. So it's not a question of a total sum of data or the total sum of the cost of the data for Scotland would be a new additional cost for this economy. Instead, it would be what you'd need to deduct from that is the costs of the data that are already gathered here. And I know perhaps belabored this point, but the costs of not doing so. If you're flying in the dark, you're going to make the occasional crash, and there is a real cost in not having good economic data.
Is it the case? What's more risky or dangerous? Is it the need for more accurate data that has less margin for error, or is it having up-to-date data? Because I do know that there's different aspects of data collection that we don't get reports or don't get information for until from 2 years down the line.
Yep.
So there's reports coming in showing stats for 11-12, 10-11, and I suppose that relates to your phrase with regards to rear view mirror. But how big a problem? What's the biggest problem? Is it getting the accurate data, or getting late data?
I have to say both. And there's also an additional thing of absent data that's just not available at all. And that's a key problem. So all of those problems, and that relates to a whole series of sort of misconceptions as well, I think, about how the economy works. There's a big focus, for example, in the official publications on export data. Well, we all understand that, you know, if we export more, we're probably going to be better off. But there's a complete absence of understanding, it seems to me, informing that of how a modern economy works, that most exports are actually the re-export of imports that you've added some value to. So you need import data as well. And if you're going to talk about value added of imports, then you're talking about input-output tables, and then you're talking about GDP. So you need to know all of this stuff. If you're going to improve export competitiveness, you need to understand what you're talking about before you can improve it. And that's the whole panoply of economic data, some of which is not simply that it's late or that it's patchy. Some of it doesn't exist.
All right.
With regards to the Scottish model, how comparable is that?
Different product.
Or how does that connect to the Exchequer and the Finance Department in London? And how does that, because of their system, how does Treasury treat Scotland different than with us at the present time? And then I suppose to add that question or expand that question, how does Greater Manchester, Greater London compile data, or do they?
If you were drawing up a scale of where there is knowledge about the economy and public finances, scale of 1 to 10, if Scotland were 10, I mean, I'm not saying that it can't be improved, it definitely could be improved. There's a big gap in the public finances data for Scotland because they have to rely on Treasury data. But if Scotland's 10, then this economy would be down around 1 or 2. It would be below London. London has more. There's more data available in relation to London than there is for this economy, in my view, because of the Great London Authority set up GLA Economics to provide that. It would be on a par with Manchester or somewhere like that, somewhere smaller without its own devolved government.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Okay, Paul. Mr. Dunn, Gordon.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks very much, gentlemen, for coming in. Can you just remind us when this report was drafted and it's been issued?
Well, it's been a long time in the gestation process because well, I think when the first draft was well over 2 years ago, and there were a series of reviews, including by the DFP, of the final report, which I can't remember, came out sometime earlier this year.
Okay. Would you agree that there's been quite an upturn in the economy then since you started off on this report?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't know how anyone could know.
How the economy is the upturn that there has been? You're not aware?
Not aware of the data that supports that idea.
Well, generally, I take it you do read the papers?
Yeah, I do.
You do? So you know what's happening in Northern Ireland?
A bit from reading the newspapers.
Okay, the programme for government you seem to have issues with in relation to the targets. You reckon that the outputs are weak, information is poor, the measurement.
Yeah, it's the measurement. It's not the targets. I don't have an issue. I think the issue of a programme for government is a matter for the authors of the report and people here. And if you wanted my view on them, I think they're quite good targets. No, it's the ability to measure whether the targets are being achieved or not. That's the difficulty. In the absence of economic data, well-meaning reports tend to be just that. They tend to be well-meaning ones without the support of anything which can measure success or failure or something in between the two.
You reckon that the necessary tools are not being used to bring forward this information?
I assume that's the case in some instances. In some instances, some new tools might be needed in terms of providing economic data.
Okay. And you're adamant that you're not aware of any written upturn in the economy then, since...
Well, I see it from... I'm told, you know, that in terms of the British economy and indeed the Irish economy, that there's...
This is the British economy, so...
I'm talking about the British-wide economy.
Okay.
But anyway, that there is an upturn.
That's all you know?
Well, I examined the data, and what I understand is that there's an increase in consumption, and there's an increase in speculation on housing, in particular, in Britain.
What about growth of jobs, uplift?
Well, the jobs is a very interesting one, because jobs, in terms of the ONS aggregate data, jobs are being created, but there's a big difficulty with the data that's provided in that, for example, a full-time job includes a 0 hours contract, which is not widely understood. So that, for example, if you're on a 0 hours contract, that's regarded as full-time employment, even though you might not work a single hour that week. So there's a significant difficulty with that. At the same time, what we do know is that average real earnings are falling. So it's a very strange situation where, in terms of the official data, you have jobs growing, unemployment falling, and yet you have real earnings falling. That's a very strange set of circumstances, and I think it's accounted for by what I would regard as something close to a transformation of the jobs market, where there's a big growth in casualisation, part-time jobs, 0 hours contracts, and that's presented as a big growth in employment.
Could you just maybe, Gordon, if you bear with me, because you've got a theme there, if I could explore it a wee bit further. And we'll take it the regional economy of Scotland, where you say these economic data measures have been in place for, what, 4 years now? What is it telling you?
In terms of Scotland?
What's it telling you about the economy? Gordon has referred to the issues around economic growth and the measures and what is happening. Is there an economic growth or not? What is that model of measuring in Scotland showing?
That's showing a very modest upturn after a very sharp recession. We don't know, because these are new economic data for Scotland. But if we compare what's happened to Britain and other advanced economies historically, the Scottish economy had a downturn which was not quite as sharp as the 1930s depression, and it's had an upturn but of a very weak character, in fact the weakest on record as far as Britain is concerned, and Scotland's in line with that. In terms of the composition, and this is the important part in relation to GDP data, if you remove the effect of oil, because that's a contentious whether that's Scottish or not, let's leave that aside for a second, but in terms of the onshore Scottish economy, unfortunately that's driven by things like house building. I say unfortunately because I'm in favour of building new houses, but if that's all that's being done, then that's not a sustainable basis for economic activity. It's not being driven by investment, which is the key to long-term prosperity. So in Scotland, they know this. Whether they would take my view of what to do about it is an entirely different matter.
So these measures that have been in place, essentially, what benefit have they been to the Scottish economy? Is it in a nutshell, both in terms of measurement of activity and projections as to where they should be going? What actual tangible benefits have those been in the years that they have been in use and in place?
In fact, very little in terms of policy making, but that's because policy making is, without getting into the whole debate that people are voting on today, that's because policy making hasn't really deviated very greatly from Westminster. So that there hasn't been any big changes in taxation, there hasn't been any big changes in public investment, etc., etc. There's been changes at the margin. So in order to affect economic change, you need to use the information provided from the GDP and other data to make big economic policy decisions. They have the information on which to do that. The big economic policy decisions haven't been taken or aren't very significantly different from the ones that Westminster has taken.
So they're not using it, and Gordon, I'm coming back to you now.
That's okay.
So I just wanted to tease this point out. So is it the case then that the data is there and they're not using it?
No, that's there, but in terms of, to affect economic change,
yes,
it's a necessary condition to have information, but not sufficient. You have also to make policy decisions, and those policy decisions haven't varied much from Westminster. They've got the information on which to base decisions, they just haven't taken any big decisions that were different from Westminster.
Right. So, right, Gordon.
Just finally, in relation to evidence of growth, have you seen the Invest NI annual report?
Yes.
You have?
Yeah.
Does that not give you an assurance and clear evidence that Northern Ireland is on the turn? There's clear evidence there of the upturn in the economy. They've had the best report ever, Invest NI. Is that not good news, something that you should speak positively about? Maybe it would help you to gain information as to how Northern Ireland is actually performing. I'm not talking about a report that's at least 2 years old.
Well, this report isn't 2 years old. That's factually incorrect.
You started it commenced 2 years ago.
It was revised repeatedly in light of submissions from peer reviews and the DFP.
So it's somewhat dated, but answer my question, please, in relation to Invest.
It's less dated than the data we're talking about. The reality is that Invest NI doesn't do what it says on the tin.
Yeah, that's nonsense.
Well, sorry, just could you explain what you're saying there, please?
Invest.
I think you have a very jaundiced view, by the way.
Well, just bear with. I want to hear an explanation as to what you're saying. And how you logically come to that conclusion.
Invest is a very strict economic term. It means it doesn't mean speculation, which is financial market gambling, so on. It means gross. It's what it's identified as economically as gross fixed capital formation. That's building things, building plant, machinery, equipment, and housing. There isn't any data for this economy on what the level of gross fixed capital formation is. There isn't any. There isn't. That's been discontinued. So when people talk about investing in Northern Ireland, there isn't any data to show them what the level of investment is. So we don't know whether it's going up, down, or sideways. That's my point.
Could I add a comment, which is more from a layperson's point of view on this one? And from where NICFA sits, I think we recognise well the inward investment that Invest Northern Ireland has attracted, in the last while. I think it's very, very positive. We think that is good, particularly the added value jobs that they've been attracting. And I think when you look, by reading the papers and listening to the commentators, Northern Ireland on the private sector side has showed some recovery, but I think they all still recognise that it's fairly fragile. But as I say, we certainly would commend what has been done by Invest and by the Minister, and particularly the First and Deputy First, in terms of the work that they've done abroad to attract it. I think we're looking at our two separate things here. We're looking at whether the data is good enough to be able to make your decisions in the future. And I see that as no reflection on Northern Ireland or what is being done at the moment.
Okay. Thanks for that clarification, Seamus. Gordon, did you want to...
No, obviously we're not getting a straight answer in relation to the performance of Invest, but I think enough has been said, and I think we'll note that in relation to the report. Thanks, Chair.
Okay.
My question is about that. Is that okay?
Right, that's okay. Come on ahead.
Thanks very much for the report. I'm a bit cynical. I'm a big bit cynical about this report, Michael. I'm from a background involved in local economic development for many years. Certainly not an expert, I'm not an economist either. But let me just ask you a couple of questions. You mentioned that the government is flying blind when it comes to economic policy. So are you saying that this is new stuff that you're bringing to us? So not just this administration, but previous administrations have been working blindly in terms of economic policy?
Well, if you don't have data,
you're saying that, right?
Yeah.
So The problem I have is this, is that if the First Minister and Deputy First Minister were here today and were listening to your report, what would you say to them? Both of them have been saying that we have created more jobs in this last couple of years than we've ever done in our history. And certainly if you look at PwC, you know, you're economist yourself, and economists from PwC said early on this year that we created over 20,000 jobs up until 2014. So what I'm saying is that surely if we're going down this blind alley, you know, we don't have it, the data. I'm not saying that we don't have it, but I'm saying why are we so successful? There's not a week that's passed this last number of months when we haven't created jobs.
We just read that.
Are we just been lucky?
We hasn't heard about it.
No. One of the good things is economic activity can take place without economists. And it can take place without economic...
What was that point? I just didn't hear. What was that point?
Economic activity can take place without economists.
Yes.
And it can take place without economic data, which is good, because it doesn't rely on people like me to make things happen. But what is useful is if people in the economy as a whole know what is happening. That's surely got to be a good thing.
Yeah, I agree.
So I think it's tremendous that jobs are being created. I think more jobs need to be created. My point is that if we have some information, we might know how we might help that process. We might know...
So it could be even better then?
Yeah, we might know why the 20,000 were created. We might say, well, why did they come here? Why did they invest here? What sectors of the economy? How did they relate to other sectors of the economy? If, for example, we did a survey of companies that considered investing here but chose to go somewhere else, if we said to them, well, what was it that tipped your decision not to be here but to be somewhere else? And half of them said it was, I don't know, the lack of rail infrastructure, or the lack of something or something else, or somewhere else had better, then more graduates in something, some other sector. Well, we might be able to say, well, that relates to this sector of the economy and how we could invest in it and what would be the spin-offs from it. But the trouble is, without the economic data, we don't know.
Well, we do have that data. I mean, if we wanted to find out, there's a company come over here, Invest in Northern Ireland certainly do that, and they can show clearly, you know, why companies came here, what it's to do with the educated workforce, in terms of Northern Ireland being like any other major or European country, and add peace, prosperity, all those things as well. But let me just ask you another question, and this is a genuine question. You have 5 recommendations, or is it 7 recommendations? 7?
6.
5 somewhere.
6.
If we accept your recommendations, what will that mean in terms of the impact for us in terms of economic policy and, more important, output in terms of benefits and in terms of jobs being created?
You would know what the impact of your current policies are better. So there are big budgets here, and they're being spent. You would know what was happening in those budgets, and you would know more the interrelationship between the other parts of the economy, those budgets, and all other aspects. So that, for example, and this is only one example, if you were, or if the First Minister or the Deputy First Minister were making a pitch to an overseas investor, they would be able to tell them, they would be able to give them the economic data on which would support that case. Without that, you're fighting with one hand tied behind your back.
I mean, I think the recommendations would lead to the production of better, more additional data. And the key thing then is that it lets
just a first step, you were saying.
It lets ministers, and other decision makers then make the best choices that they can. But it's like that question, if it was all done, it in itself will not improve our economic situation. It then depends what you do with regard to policy. Now, you know, Sammy, as well as I, I've responded to many comprehensive spending reviews over the years through direct rule and, after devolution. And when it's put out, from government, tell us the things that you think should be done and tell us the things that you think should not be done. One of the first questions we used to always ask back was, well, tell us the things that have worked well and what benefit we've got out of them as opposed to those that haven't. And we've never got really good answers on that. So the data should help you in terms of that. But at the end of the day, it doesn't tell you what to do. You got to make up your mind, got to make up your decisions, and you got to take your risks at that point. So it's no reflection whatsoever on what has been done, and as I say, we commend that, to this point.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks. Mr. McLaughlin, Mitchell.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, Seamus and Michael. We've talked, and the report actually, uses the Scottish experience as an example of how we can improve what we're doing, and I think we should, if we can, avoid what quite often happens in this Assembly is that we very often have very intense disagreements on issues that are of very, very key social and economic significance in our community. But we don't really have the data to have a kind of coherent discourse that would maybe lead us somewhere. I think that there's a danger of that happening in this instance. Could you, in relating to the template that Scotland provides, give us some indication? Did they start in somewhere like the same place as ourselves, and how, why and when did they evolve to the point where they can present a template?
Yeah, I mean, very much so. The data they had was what's provided by the Treasury and what was provided by the ONS, Office for National Statistics. But they took the decision that it was worth investing in to build on and improve what was already available to inform economic policy making. The reality is, as we've already noted, it hasn't had really a big impact on policy. But that's a question for the elected representatives of Scotland. It may be they feel that there's no need or no possibility, or perhaps currently that they want more powers to affect economic policy. That's a separate matter from knowing what we're talking about in terms of economic data. So yeah, they started with the building blocks that are available here, but they recognised the need to add to them significantly.
Okay, well, there's two kind of issues that I would like to tease out, Chair. I mean, we have an issue. We've had a discussion with corporation tax has been referred to here, and there has been. We have an all-party position on it, which is, I think, excellent. And of course, the number one priority in the programme for government is developing and expanding the economy, rebalancing the economy. We've discussed another issue, which was the air passenger duty. We had a situation, obviously a crisis situation, in relation to the imminent loss of the only transatlantic route that we have, and people were exercised, representation was made, and we got a response from Treasury officials and the government in Westminster. In discussing the wider aspects of that, particularly in the context of our number one priority, we have found difficulty getting beyond the bottom line of eliminating air passenger duty, as opposed to a more incrementalist approach where we would identify potential new export markets connecting into, if you like, connectivity kind of hubs that exist to give us access to new markets and the consequent opportunities and benefits for the economy here. So even in that approach, people seem to go to the bun, oh, that'll cost you £60 million, whatever figures seem to just emerge about how much it's going to cost you. But no figures are produced to kind of set against that. Even if you were to go for, completely eliminating air passenger duty and put us in a position where we can compete with what's happening in Dublin airport front, they're just going to wipe the floor with us because they have taken the pragmatic and the practical kind of steps. But we can't even take the baby steps towards that. And there seems to be, just almost a cultural thing, which I would be interested to know if Scotland run into those problems, or people just said, information is not bad. You may kind of have arguments about what you're going to do with the information, but we all should have the same information. It should be transparent. And, I don't even hear the clamour for this change coming from the sources that I would expect here in our economy, the players, the people who... the academics, the economists, the various consultancies that are out there, and then the representative of business in this region. They seem to just back off this kind of argument. And is that cultural, or do they think that let's not just kind of stir this up because people just disagree and will fall out and will run into even more bad news in terms of a dysfunctional assembly? Why do we not work on the basis of information and data and science?
That's a very big question. I mean, to take the first point first, I mean, it's beyond the scope of this report, but it's a bugbear of mine about how the Treasury presents data generally, because you'll see from the budget reports every year, there's a cost, just a cost from doing whatever. There's never a benefit. There's never an attempt to say, well, yes, if we cut X tax or if we raise X tax, then there's not just what the revenue impact on the Treasury is, but this has this economic impact and it has something else as well. None of that. So it's actually, it's not economics at all. And it's actually very bad accounting, because it doesn't take account of the various other impacts it's going to have on your accounts. That's a bugbear of mine. I wouldn't claim to be an expert at all, and very far from it, whatever the opposite of an expert is, on the political culture that might inform people's approach. I do get the feeling that even mentioning this is controversial, and that might be something that relates to long-standing divisions here, but it seems to me obvious that for any policymaker, the more information you have, the better. I think that's a very obvious point.
Can I add to that? The last time I was up at this committee was around the fiscal powers report, as I said, and I think I made a comment then that one of the things that we were trying to do in NICFA in terms of all of this work was certainly help our sector and then wider Northern Ireland be better informed about these issues. And I said the last thing that we should do is take ideological positions in ignorance. So look at the evidence and then make up your view. I think is very important. Personally, I'm very pragmatic on these things. And if you take the debate on corporation tax, a lot of organisations in our sector would have suffered a lot of angst around it, because they would have seen moving public expenditure, money from certain public expenditure that might help people on low incomes into, a tax reduction for big corporations, and they might have felt, that was not necessarily a good thing. My view, and the view that NICFA came to, is that anything that was likely to lead to a better outcome in our economy is worth looking at. Now, to me, the jury's still out on the corporation tax issue. I think we have to look very, very closely at the evidence. I do think that big companies are very good at managing their tax affairs and all of that. But if our considered view on anything was, after looking at all the evidence, that there was a reasonable prospect that it would change things significantly to our benefit, then it is worth taking the risk. And I think you do that after. We're not great here, I think, in trying to gather as much evidence as possible and then making some of our decisions.
Well, I suppose that leads me then to another issue, which is the you know, the way in which Europe approaches, you know, the provision of data or the collection of data, and you know, to the extent to which they drill that down into regional economies. But the North doesn't figure in that. Is that exclusive or particular or peculiar to the North, to Northern Ireland, or is it an issue that impacts on Scotland, Wales, North Eastern England?
Well, in terms of the European data, what I call the nuts levels of regions.
You think that's a good description?
Well, maybe unfortunate. But there are same-sized regional economic units in Europe that do have much more detailed European-wide, or European-based rather, economic data. So it's doable, and people feel it's valuable. And particularly in relation to Europe, there are an awful lot of funds that Europe provides, and one of the things they look for in terms of the allocation of those funds is economic data to support arguments. So it couldn't possibly be a negative to have that data, which is not currently available. Some regions do have extremely detailed economic data of that type provided through Eurostat.
And have you any understanding of why that information isn't collected by Eurostat? Who has resisted it or stopped it or has overlooked it? And you know, if that's not a question that you can answer, perhaps you can give us an indication of how we could establish why that omission exists.
Well, Eurostat won't operate without the cooperation of the local statistical agency, which in this case is the ONS. And if the ONS is telling them that they can't provide or don't have the resources or whatever the reason is for that data, then Eurostat won't go ahead and do it.
Okay, and well, I think it probably would be unfair to ask the witnesses this question, but Chair, I think that we might need to explore whether this Assembly and its own statistical resource couldn't further explore this possibility, because I do think that in terms of the budget review process, one of the issues that was highlighted very strongly was the whether or not we were maximising our access to European funding. Yep. And clearly that is a deficiency in that approach if we don't have the information to back up an application or a process. So could we make a note of that as a committee, just as something that we could maybe raise through?
I think probably as a result of today's deliberations, what I was going to suggest at the end of the meeting, that we seek further, if you like, opinion around this report, and we'll come to that later on, Mitchell, and we can maybe incorporate your suggestion into that.
Okay, and I mean, I'm content enough to leave it at that, but I presume that will give us the opportunity to just put down the marker in terms of hearing from our Scottish counterparts, how they manage to get to the position they're in, and the pros and cons and the benefits and other ways that they have gleaned from that process. So thank you very much.
Thanks for that. Mr. Agnew, Stephen.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the evidence so far. It's been very informative, and I think really highlights an issue that, as others have mentioned, the committee has been increasingly aware of, but this adds further to it. Given what you have said, Michael, do you feel that the executive has insufficient data to make a decision on such a major issue as the level of our corporation tax should be devolved?
No, in the sense of there's no absolute level of information that's required before any decision can be taken. But clearly, the more information you have, the better informed the decision is going to be. So, elected representatives should take decisions because they represent the electorate. That's my general view. As someone who tends to operate in the field of economic data and analysis, my point of view is always going to be, if you have better economic data then you can have a better analysis, or you may have a better analysis, and that should inform the decision. But I think, if it's for elected representatives to decide whether they, what powers they want and how to use them. How to use them is is going to be key. That should definitely be being informed by reliable economic data.
Okay, if I ask you about economists then, rather than politicians, do you think there can be any credibility to the predictions of economists who say, I think the Economic Advisory Group, for example, said corporation tax, the reductions, essentially it would pay for itself within 11 years, it would have an 11-year payback. Do you think we have the data to make that type of prediction?
I haven't seen that forecast. I would be surprised if having seen the detailed work that went into that, I would be surprised if I would make that same prediction confidently. Because without the economic data, without knowing how much corporation tax you're getting in, and without knowing the detail of the economic impact of a change in the corporation tax, then I wouldn't know how one would begin to construct that forecast.
Okay, so
I certainly, knowing what I know about the data, I certainly wouldn't make that forecast.
Okay. So essentially, it comes back to the phrase "flying in the dark" again. We can, as you say, we're entitled as politicians, and the executives are entitled to make decisions, but to actually try and predict the outcome, we don't have the data to do that.
No, and even where it does, it depends on the overall economic framework. I mean, the current coalition government in Westminster has cut corporation tax from 28p down to 20p, and it was done with the assertion that corporation tax revenues would rise as a result because investment would rise. Neither of those things have happened.
Moving on to the data we don't have, and one of the areas you mentioned is GDP, and I think GDP could be characterised a bit like democracy as a form of governance. GDP is the worst form of data you can collect on an economy, apart from every other form. I suppose we have an opportunity to not have to do things how things have always been done, if we're looking to do something different. Is there any other models we can look at as alternatives to GDP? To say, is this worth considering? Is this a better way to measure the size and growth of our economy?
Well, the ONS already provides a couple of very good measures, which is GVA. I've not wanted to bog down the committee in acronyms for obvious reasons. Gross value added is a very, very useful measure of economic activity. It's not as complete as GDP. And it also, like GDP, has three components: incomes, output, and expenditure. And again, without bogging down the committee in this, having those three is like the three legs of a stool. You need all three for it to stand up. And currently, there are GVA data only for two. We have for incomes, and we have it for output, but not expenditure. But that's not unusual. But in absent GDP data as well, then there's a decided value in having the GVA data, but it's incomplete. It's not as good as having GDP data. There's a whole panoply of statistics which are all very useful. There's no one magic bullet. If you have this piece of economic data, you'll be able to take all economic policy decisions with perfect knowledge. And you'll never have perfect knowledge about the economy because we are looking through the rearview mirror. But if you have the GDP data, that's the sort of overarching, I suppose, collation of all the key economic data. The GVA is very helpful. The input-output tables are extremely helpful because they tell you how the different sectors of the economy operate together, and so on and so on. But you're asking a nerd.
And I appreciate it's not a question that comes with a simple answer. Given, I suppose, that you're sitting alongside the CEO of NICFA, are there any models that you think that we should be looking at to better model the impact of economic decisions on the social impacts of economic decisions?
Well, there's two aspects to that. One is, and I know I'll be very brief because I know I'll sound like a broken record. You can't build an economic model without data. That's the first point. So, in terms of the social impact, there's quite a lot of quite good social data that relates to this economy, which is very useful and very important because ultimately that's what economic policy should be about. It should be about the well-being of the population. The only problem is without the economic data, you don't know how the two are interreacting. That's the difficulty.
Okay,
thank you.
Thanks for that. Mr. Kinahan.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Michael. Thank you very much for your report. I'm afraid, like many, very sceptical on it. I see a very important use for economic data. But if I go back to your analogy at the beginning of trying to drive the car by looking out the back window, in the modern world, so much is moving so quickly. Businessmen need quick decisions because everything is on computers, information is moving very quickly. You've got to be looking out the front window. So economic data has to be feeding the information that's helping you look out the front window. And I just felt that as I read through this whole report, we've got a lot of generalities. It's to know which data we need and how to use it. And if I give you an example, if you're talking about corporation tax, one of the things we need is investment companies coming in need to know there are more buildings, good buildings in the right places. If you do the economic side, it'll tell us in a nice chart that we're not building enough buildings. If you look at it the other way and you talk to the businessmen on the ground who are trying to invest, they will tell you where they want the buildings. And then so it's trying to get those two things to work together. I just think we can concentrate too much on economic data when actually we've got to be as agile as ever in the modern world so that we're beating the Americans or the Indians or the Chinese to the decisions so that our technology. So what I'm really leading up to is, you know, we need to know more. There's a very good list of items on page 20 but they're still just headings. I would love to see more detail of what you want out of retail sales, how that line takes you forward and what the information is going to be used for. I see its position, but I think we're focusing at the wrong end. I want to look at out the front window. And you see my point? I think what I'd like the committee to be doing is looking at your headings there and finding out actually what detail we need. We can't have all the information in the world, but what's the absolutely key detail that we need and how we work it? I'm sorry, it's a bit of a rant, but I see your point.
I didn't take it like that at all, actually. I thought it was quite a very valuable point. Yeah. I mean, without, making this, an epic report, which no one would read, you are left with headlines. You are left with, you need, data on retail sales. But for, say, a business operating in the retail sector, the idea that, and I know this intimately from my family circumstances, that most retailers regard the official retail sales data as a bit of a joke, because, again, it's not timely and it's not that reliable for the sector they operate in. But my point is that I actually agree with your rant. I took it more as a plea for more data. But economists love labels. That's of a more microeconomic kind, and what I was asked to do was on the macroeconomic data. I actually think the more information we have on both macro and micro, the better everyone will be. We're all economic policy decision makers. Every individual, every business, every part of government all make economic decisions every day of the week. The information we require to inform those is quite important.
But do you see my point, Joe? You're asking for more resources to produce more data. We're in a world where there's not much resource available. What data exactly? Because we could just keep on pumping more and more money in to get more and more information. And that's what I'm really asking, is we need to sort of shorter, sharper detail on what data we need.
Do you want me to come back to that? Or is that...
I would say come back on that.
No,
today.
I would just concur. More economic data we need. For specific needs, this is fairly useless. You know, the broad macroeconomic data, if you're a woman who runs a business in the retail sector, you want very specific data on that sector. You want to know how it evolved over time. You want to know. Definitely do want to know how your customers are doing. You want to know what their pay is like, whether it's going up or whether it's going down, whether jobs are growing or contracting. You want all those factors, and you want them in as real time as possible. So I agree. I agree with you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mitchell, you wanted to come back on this
yeah,
one.
it's just provoked really by Danny's line of questioning. We've talked about Scotland, and a number of members have talked about it. Are there other examples of other states that take this approach of, you know, sharing the data, gathering the data in the first instance, and then applying it as information tools for policy development and decisions?
Well, there are lots. I mean, the most modern advanced economies tend to sort of have a bottom-up as well as a top-down approach to both gathering economic data and to disseminating it. So that in I only use this example because I know it well, not that it's the best example. In the United States, at the state level and at the city level, they often have very detailed economic data, which is used as the input into the federal data, but also allows them to take very detailed and hopefully well-informed economic decisions about what to do at their state or city level. And it's a two-way process. It comes top-down and bottom-up.
So all relevant information is available and shared?
Yeah, that's they get
no glass walls or
they get federal funding for the provision of economic data, and they supplement it with their own.
Okay, right, thanks. Mr. Anderson, Sydney, you wanted to come back in on a point earlier?
Just quickly, there's a couple of wee points. Thank you for your presentation coming along today. This whole area of collecting data, I note in your report that you say there's little incentive for the local administration in Northern Ireland to accept full responsibility for the preparation and publication of such data, their own data. Why do you say that? Where does that come from?
It's a huge cost. If it's simply a question of the local administration has to provide it, there's going to be overlap with the national authority, the ONS. There may be separate and distinct publications. I think it's much more likely to be effective if done cooperatively. That's my point.
It's just mainly cost. You're just saying here it's just due to cost.
Cost and duplication, and also variation. If you have two sets of economic data, which do you rely on? So there's that issue.
Well, the data that they already get or they already have, are you saying it's really irrelevant?
No, I mean there's hardly any data is irrelevant. It's a question of if it can be relied on to do the job that it's being asked of it, and it's very rarely the case that, and I'm not a statistic, but it's very rarely the case that statisticians provide useless data. It may happen. It's what people do with the statistics they provide, and if people are asking the data to do more than it's, or to carry a greater weight than it's capable of, that's where the difficulty arises.
I think the comment was also made, I'm not sure who made it, that we're not great here at gathering evidence in Northern Ireland, data evidence.
Sorry, you'd have to refer me to what you...
I know there was a comment was made there by some of you that we're not great at gathering evidence here in Northern Ireland, but does that come down to the fact is that you talk about the incentive is not there because of issues with cost? Surely, a lot of people have gathered evidence. If a company's coming to invest in Northern Ireland I wouldn't think they would arrive here in Northern Ireland without having a lot of information on statistics in relation to where they go set up their base. And we've heard many arguments in the past as to why companies, although we as politicians might want them to go to our own local areas, but they'll say, no, we're not going there because our data shows us Belfast, Lisburn, Vermont, everywhere it is better off for. So these people do come with a lot of data and they do a lot of research. So they do gather a lot of information on, are assisted by, my colleague talked about InvestNI and others. So don't see this as being all data is good, but I still think there is good data here on the way we're going forward. I don't say it's all doom and gloom. Do you think it is?
No, I don't think it is. I don't think it's the case that it's all doom and gloom, and I don't think it's the case that all the data provided here is rubbish. I hope nothing I've said and nothing I said in the report would suggest that. My report and my plea is for better data, more informed data, more consistent, more timely, and better quality. And it's not just the case that business needs it. Everyone needs it. Government needs it too. It's one of the key things. As I mentioned before, government's a big actor in the economy. And if the government doesn't understand what's going in the economy, then it's, let's say, the decisions it's likely to make are going to be suboptimal.
Okay.
You talk about, just a couple more, in relation to a number of things here and getting this data, but can I ask you one question I had? What work have you done yourself for, do you do any work for political parties or anything in your area of work?
Work for political parties, yes. I've done a number of, I've worked for a number of political parties and done work with them. I've done work with the Labour Party, I've done work with Sinn Féin, I've done work with the Liberal Democrats.
Many parties, have you done work in Northern Ireland?
I've only been asked to do work for Sinn Féin.
You may get more work now, but
I hope so.
You've been asked. You've been asked to do work.
That's why the John's view.
Well, where do we see now the work?
We'll tease this every minute.
Just hold on a minute.
People note it.
We can note that, but
No, you never asked Mr. Hamilton that question.
Hold on a wee minute. The relevance of that to what we're discussing here today in the report, they're two separate things. We've established that you've done work for political parties, that can happen and that can be done. But we'll just stick with what the contents of the report are here today, please, and questioning around that.
Okay, Chair. Well, we've established that, but coming back to my original question, I do think that there is good work going on here. I'm not saying that there should not be further work done, but to maybe come with a view to say that administration here was a bit concerned that it was maybe not had not the incentives to do that. Should it be the minister, the department, or whatever? I think that incentive is there, and even with politicians. So if it's only down to cost, well, we're all in a difficult times. Finishing off, he said to my colleague that this report was 2 years in the making, or in the process. But I'm sure you'd agree with me that everything changes. And if you're able to do another report starting today, that maybe you'll come up with a different view and a lot of the things that's happening in the economy. And my colleague did tease out the economic sort of downturn has now, as far as jobs go. We see maybe the green shoots as we're talking about. And things are improving. So you may maybe have a different view on some of the report and some of the things that you say.
Maybe if I can say on that, I mean, we recognise and agree with you absolutely in terms of the good work that has been done in terms of job creation and inward investment. This report, ultimately, as I see it, is only focused on the data that we might collect. And it's what it's saying is that if we collected other data, that our decision makers, you and ministers, might better frame policy. I mean, it is no reflection on how well Invest has done up to this point, or the Minister for Enterprise Investment, as I say, I commend that, What we're looking at is the issue of the data that is available. After you've got it, it's a matter then for making the political decisions. The other thing is, the best data in the world, I think, will not mean that we will make, that automatically we will transform the economy in Northern Ireland. If it was like that, presumably, or if it was totally scientific, presumably areas all around the world will do that. There will be hard and difficult choices that will be made. All we're saying is, the more data we have, the better people are able to
hear that point. Thanks very much for that, Seamus. Now I have two brief points from Phil and Megan here.
Well, the first point is I think there's been a fundamental misunderstanding of what this report's about. Some people seem to think this report is about criticising the economic performance, but it hasn't looked at the economic performance at all. It's looked at how we measure the economic performance, and they're two very different things. And I think we're talking here all the time about devolving and reducing corporation tax, and there seems to be executive agreement on that. But if we're going to make any changes to such a fundamental tax as corporation tax, surely we should be able to, after the event, turn around and say this is the effect it had on the economy, this is the effect it had on different areas of the economy in terms of geographical regions and in terms of different sectors of the economy. And I think the ability to make evidence-based decisions is something we all want, and I genuinely can't understand why anybody would argue against evidence-based decision making, because it's a very, very basic point. So, the question, Speaker, is in terms of where the question in terms of where the blockage is the blockage locally. So, if the Executive and the Assembly was to say, we're going to invest X number of pounds in determining the best economic data we can, are there still blockages within ONS and the British Treasury that need to be sorted, or where are the blockages to getting the level of economic data that you recommend in this report?
I would be very surprised if there was a blockage at ONS in terms of their willingness to provide economic data. There might be a problem they would argue in terms, I'm sure they would argue, in terms of the resources that they would need to provide more robust data. And I think the likelihood is that you might encounter difficulties at the Treasury. My understanding of how the Treasury operates, and I have to say, it's from an external observer, never having worked there, but I have friends and colleagues who do. I think that it might run into difficulties there.
That's a fair point.
Thanks, Patsy.
Right. Just picking up on that, is that same detail being provided to Scotland?
Sorry,
the bit that Phil was talking about there, trying to tease out the bits that may be potentially absent, or there may be a blockage to those bits that potentially, and we're into the hypothetical here because there may or may not be blockages, but those specific items that Phil referred to there from the likes of the ONS, Treasury, has there been a problem in Scotland uncovering data that is material or useful or relevant from the Treasury? Are you aware? You may not be aware.
I'm not aware of it. I think my understanding, and in this instance I strongly recommend asking the people involved directly. My understanding is that they simply took the view that whatever was not currently available, that they would supplement themselves, and worked with ONS and others in order to do that. I don't think, for example, there are thousands of agents of the Scottish Government going out every week and surveying retail sales in Scotland. They work with ONS to do that.
Okay, thanks for that.
I mean, it's the case that the information has been provided, so the principles has been accepted for Scotland, so why not for us? It would seem as if.
Well, I think we probably all need to ask we maybe need to ask all our colleagues that, Richard, then, Megan, you wanted to make a point
too. Just a brief comment. Phil's actually covered a lot of what I was just going to say. I'm just genuinely confused by both Gordon and Sydney's approach at questioning today. I don't know how you can have a jaundiced view on cold hard facts, and assuming you've read the report, you'll note that it's not been commissioned by Sinn Féin, it's been commissioned by NICFA.
Well, I think we've established that.
Yes.
So, had you a question that you want to make?
Yeah, well,
the link there's a clear link.
Right, I want to stick clearly
cold hard fact.
Sorry, hold on a minute. I want to stick clearly to the report, please.
That's what I'm doing. So.
Well, sorry, stick clearly to a question around the report.
Our economy is not all about attracting foreign direct investment, which might be a surprise to some people, and the report doesn't criticise Invest NI. I just don't see the downside of being able to make informed economic and actually social decisions as well. How can collecting more data
Right, sorry,
be bad?
the question around the report, no?
He's not saying that.
You can make comments. Not everything has to be.
No, sorry, I thought you said you wanted to make a question at the end. Okay, so...
Could I just add in terms of all our reports and all the research that we commission, and we commission a wide variety of organisations and individuals to do research for it. We do that on the basis of who is best placed, who's got the experience and the professional knowledge on any of the particular issues. We don't do it on, who else they've worked for or anything like that.
Presumably you tender your work like everybody else does.
We do.
Yeah, okay. Right, thanks very much indeed for that, Seamus. While we focused on the report, I found it good and refreshing and definitely food for thought, and we'll talk among ourselves here as to what our next course of action would be on that, okay? So thank you very much for your time, okay?
Thank you.
Right. Thank you. We just then, it raised a number of issues, and certainly Mitchell, you had an issue there too that I was thinking of that we should incorporate into it. And in terms of the valid points that the report clearly did raise and taking it forward, I have a suggestion here that we do consider forwarding it along to the Northern Ireland Centre for Economic Policy for a view, and also we have commissioned an economic advisor ourselves as a committee, Dr. Budd. So we could potentially forward it along to him for initial thoughts and views when he's meeting us as a committee when he comes over as well, if that's appropriate. Now, I just want to deal with your specific point, Mitchell, then I'll come to you, Phil, and you, Danny. Your specific point, Mitchell, was around Scotland, and if we could commission some research, we suggested from Assembly Research as to how it works in Scotland and a bit more detail around that.
Yeah, that would be a good starting point, but obviously that would probably, in my view, highlight the need to bring over some expert witnesses from the Scottish process. We can only learn from talking to the people that have actually pioneered this approach. It's not the only approach that would appear, but I would be very, very interested indeed in hearing from them directly.
Yes. Okay. Right.
Chair, on that, maybe two courses here. First of all, contact ONS and ask them what they provide
good idea,
for Scotland, and also maybe ask research to identify the appropriate people to speak to.
So just common sense kind of responses to this.
Good approach. Phil, you wanted to...
My suggestion is very straightforward. I would like a Hansard of the briefing so that we can go through it and look at the issues that...
Yes. We discussed that earlier with Jim. Apparently Hansard, we hadn't enough personnel to come along today. But I think if members are agreed that we get a Hansard off this, and we'll need that to forward it along if we're asking for opinions from other members to the thing. Yes, Sam.
Are we asking Invest NI to respond to this? Because I think we should send them a copy as well, because this guy was very critical. In one stage he said there's no idea why investors don't come here.
That was an interpretation on the language rather than on what the actual word investment means.
Well, we can ask them for their views on the report and how they collate their data. That would do no harm.
Fairness, we recently got a briefing from Invest where they have now upgraded their reporting and statistical I think that's grand, because that's going to kind of fill all the gaps, because we were always complaining about, what is how many, what is the promotion of a job and what is the creation of a job and so on and so on.
We'll forward them along the report then if members are happy enough for their comments on it and as to what actions they're taking around the collation of economic data, specifically in the direction of that's been highlighted as missing in the report, and ask their views on it. Danny, you wanted to...
I was just so concerned that we still don't really know what data. We're dealing in generalities, and I wondered if we could go back to Michael and get a bit more specific, because we could go on and on and on looking for more and more data. It's the same as sort of what...
Perhaps maybe the research from Scotland and getting some experts, for want of a better word, from Scotland about the Scottish experience might be helpful to us, because we don't want to be going reinventing the wheel, you know.
He did say GDP and how much corporation tax is generated in the north.
But I mean, we got a very good set of headings in here. I just
National insurance contributions.
Well, there's a list of about 12 things on page 5 of the report that he says are either absent or could be improved. So I presume that's where we'll start.
But the vagaries, the general points.
Well, it's not really. You know, it's input, output, it's retail sales, it's inflation, capital stock, proportion of value added.
We can't expect him. That's basically over to us now to do the other body of work. And if picking up on what Mitchell had suggested there, if we can sort of find out exactly what's happening elsewhere on this, particularly Scotland, how they do it, well, that can only be of assistance to us. Okay. Right, so we're happy enough for that then. Just a couple of items, and then Phil's going to take over. I have to dart out and make a couple of quick phone calls here myself. So,
not be long, will you? I don't do it.
A couple of hours, aye. No, it'll only be about 5-10 minutes max, Phil. Okay, thank you for that. Now, a number of matters are raising. Agenda item number 5, the economic advisor that we'd mentioned. Leslie Budd is to meet with the committee on Tuesday, the 30th of September. Lunch has been arranged at the members' dining room for 12:45, and the committee office will be in touch to confirm members attend. So if members could make a special effort to be there, please just, it would be important. There are a lot of issues around.
Could I just give a general health warning respecting my availability, and particularly with the Speaker off? So, it's a plenary day, and I won't go until 9:30 that morning after the Speaker's meeting. So it just see me doing it every time, if we would just understand.
And that's a Tuesday as well, so you'd be expected to see to other duties, Mitchell. Okay, the next item then is page 75. That's about the Economic Advisory Group, an update from the department. Now, there is a meeting outstanding for quite a period of time, I think, Jim, isn't there? To meet with this Economic Advisory Group. And it would be helpful if we did meet them and discuss. I see there they're developing their forward work programme 2014 to 15, which you would hope that would be well advanced now. So it might be helpful if we met with them at some stage to hear what their forward work programme is and potentially learn a wee bit from them about their activities. So agreed that we do that. Yep.
When are we meeting with them?
As soon as there is an outstanding request as far as it can call for a meeting with them, but just we haven't heard from them as to when. Okay, agreed. We give them a bit of a refresher about that meeting then.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, thank you. Next item then is the ERDF Growth and Jobs Programme. Now, this is at page 76. And the response from the department to the committee's queries in respect of the draft 2014 to 20 ERDF Growth and Jobs Programme. Members had asked to receive an update from the department following the executive meeting. The department has advised that this was cleared by the executive at its meeting on the 3rd of July. So unless members have anything that they particularly want to comment on? No? Right. Just on this, at this particular point now, it might be helpful because we're reviewing economic strategy and documents now. It occurred to me over the summer period, whenever at a moment of enlightenment, that there are a number of, if you like, ongoing issues or ongoing reports or bodies of work carried out by this committee. Particularly we had, it was prior to my time, but the research innovation inquiry carried out by this committee, and there were recommendations contained in that. I think it would be very helpful if we got an update from, if we actually revised and looked back at the report again and see if there were ongoing issues there that the department had committed to, and see just what progress was on those. If that would be important. Now, as well as that, there were issues such as the agri-food strategy, the economic strategy and the innovation strategies, all of which had, if you like, benchmarks and time frames within which to look at progress. I think it would be very helpful if we looked at those again, and if potentially there is a requirement, as I'm sure there will be, to invite officials back to discuss these matters with us and progress or otherwise on them too. So if members are happy that we just conduct a review of those bodies of work and see what outstanding items there might be that we as a committee could look at again and ask for updates from the department.
Right.
Happy enough?
Yeah, Chair, I think some of those will be scheduled in the forward work programme, so if you want to review that at that stage, I know the Agri-Food Strategy report is coming in the next couple of weeks.
That's grand. Okay. Now, the next item is the Strasbourg Declaration on Social Value Framework. This is at page 77. Okay. And there's a letter from the Office of First Deputy First Minister informing the committee that it forwarded to DETI the committee's request for a written briefing on the actions being taken to address the points raised within the report, Opportunities and Key Policies for Social Enterprise in Northern Ireland 2014 to 2020, produced by the Competitiveness and Employment Desk Officer in the Barossa Task Force Working Group, which I think maybe their name's now changed. We have a written briefing tabled today by the Department on a copy of that particular report. So unless members have any comments around that report, intend to note.
Right.
EU Matters at page 78 is a response from the Department to the Committee's request for an update on EU Matters and for details as to how the Barossa desk officers will ensure the Committee is kept informed. Now, I'm just looking at the response that came back here. Progress against associated targets is reported to the Executive on a 6-monthly basis. I think part of the problem is it's going to the Executive, and it's the connectivity between the Executive and committees is the issue as to how we get that flow of information. So if we could clarify that particular point as to how that flow of information is going to come from Executive to committees and the relevant themes that they are working on. Right. Can we clarify that point, please, with your agreement? And it says here the committee will continue to receive updates on specific EU matters of relevance to DETI. They say that we've received 5 briefings on the development of the ERDF Fund for Growth. I'm not too sure that I can recall those, 5 of them, but I certainly don't recall any other relevant specific EU matters. But we'll come to that. Okay. Now there is just we've been given the European priorities for DETI from page 79 onwards, and if members would just bear with me. There are a number of issues. This report is very unclear. At page 80, just at CE51. Carry out an assessment of the opportunity to keep Polish social enterprises. Now, I note that the desk officer produced this in December 2013. It is with us today. Now, there's an inefficiency somewhere in the system there that almost 10 months later, it's just arriving with us. If we could maybe just take a note of these, please, just, Jim, there's CE84. Now, this is, for me, complete gobbledygook. Engage in a process of knowledge exchange with DG Connect on the benefits of ICT innovation vouchers with a view to encouraging NI participation in workshops during the week of open days.
You not understand what that means?
No, I suppose it's easy enough understood if you're not from the country. Isn't it, Mitchell?
It's a whole handle, that's what they call it.
Really, clarity, I'm not sure. Then IT.11, finalise appointment of a Horizon 2020 contact by the end of October 2013. Now, I see it, the person will start in June 2014. But we could ask what the delay is on that. Develop a Horizon 2020 communication strategy by the end of June 2013. Now, I would like to know what that strategy is, what that communication strategy is.
Which number is that, Chair?
That's IT12, Jim. Certainly I'm not aware of it. There's develop an NI Horizon 2020 website by the end of August 2013. It says it's achieved website in place, but we don't know when it was achieved. And another specific thing, IT16, increase the number of Horizon 2020 evaluators from NI as a continuous process through the lifetime of the programme. I essentially do not know what that means. And IT 18, increase NI representation on EU research technology. The continuous process, I don't know what that means, what progress has been made on it.
This IT what, Chair?
IT 18. And it says on target progress is being made. You know, that could be they've bought new furniture for the office. I genuinely don't know what that is.
Cardboard cut out, maybe.
IT 110, develop a new NI Horizon 2020 guide by December 2013. Guide to be officially launched June 2014. Slippage there of 6 months.
Oh, there's a difference between develop it and launching it, Patsy, you see?
Oh, no, I do.
Launching it about a year after the thing happened.
Sorry, is there...
If it
The
ever
issue is, what
gets
was the
on.
delay?
It was developed same time though.
IT 113, draft strategic policy framework for smart specialisation by June 2013. It has been submitted to DG Radio. When was it submitted? It's been given a green here. Identify CC6, identify key infrastructure projects to align with EU policy and funding, to get an update progress there, because all I have is a black mark here on my photocopied effort. I think if they're developing a communication strategy, they could do a bit better than this. Really.
I think they're doing all right, Patsy.
Sure.
You're a bit hard on them, maybe.
What a bit.
Chair, in reference to that CC6, I think that's the overarching heading, so therefore there'd be nothing on.
All right. I just thought this had been blanked out here. Okay, thanks, Jim. But it'd be useful if we had some detail there as well. There really is none.
TC 6.1 there underneath it.
Aye, but
It's the same on every one of them, though. At the top of IT, there's a red section with a black thing beside it, and then it's delivered by doing the things underneath it.
Anyway, if members are happy enough that we pursue those, please, just. Okay?
Yeah.
Right. Now, next item is EU R&D funding cross-border initiatives. That's at page 86. All right. Page 86. Well, aye. Oh, sorry, I thought you were saying something. Right, so content to note.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, and page 100.
Right, Chair, just in 91 there, you have information on the council's responses.
What's that, Gordon?
Page 91, just on that.
Yes,
NI Horizon 2020, uptake of councils, business applicants by district council seems rather poor.
It is, aye.
I suppose it's early days, but we need to see a ramp up on that.
And thanks for raising that with me, because I was a wee bit puzzled by some of the figures here. Like page 93, it says the economic value of this collaboration is 89.2 million euros. Now, I wanted to know what. I'm not sure the economic value and the monetary value are two of the same things. So if we could just ask them to specify how much money actually came from EU fundings for these collaborative projects, and as the collaborative projects between North and South is 89, well, the economic value, I'm not sure if that's the monetary value in terms of how much was received in grant aid from the EU, and if we could specifically establish how much came to the North. What value is that in monetary value to the North as well, if it can be collated in that way? And I looked at the figures on the FP7, a total of, apparently according to their figures, 466 applications, 89 of which were successful. Now it's clear that there's a lot of help required there. Could we establish from them if they've done any evaluation as to why success rate is so low? Like, that's pretty bad.
What page?
Happy enough with that?
What page?
Sorry, that's at page 93, between pages 92 and 93. We tally up the figures there and the figures that they've given us. Total number of successful North-South projects and the total number of applications into FP7. Now, granted, some of those won't be North-South or may not be North-South, but if we could establish just the level of success rate.
Sure, just In fairness, I think the average is around 20% for FP7 projects across Europe. So that seems to be fairly average or slightly above.
If we could maybe, well, can we just ask them, if that's okay, with members, why that level of success is so apparently low? And,
just a quick point, because I know people are under a bit of time pressure. You see, there could be lessons learned from any of those kind of circumstances, and I never get any impression that people are analysing to see why particular projects succeeded and other projects didn't, and what they could do about it.
Yes.
You know, and that seems to me to
That's
be
the learning curve.
worthwhile investment, you know, just lessons learned, and then pass that information out to applicants and help them to put their
learn with the next application. So, happy enough that we obtain that from the department then. Okay. And page 100 then, which I referred to, was response from the department. The committee's request for further information following its review of the answer to AQ, which asked the Minister how many applicants supported by Invest NI had sought funding from the Technology Strategy Board, SBRI and FP7 Horizon 2020 in each of the last last 6 financial years in the current financial year. Okay, and I see one of the figures of the 11.6 committed, 3.1 in relation to projects that were drawn before completion, so that may well be 8.5 million. Okay, can we members note that? Right, and then before the next item is the print industry, and that's at page 106 in regard to, if you recall, whenever members were here from that represent the print industry, they said that they didn't appear to have been assessed as Invest NI clients, and we queried if they were able to be supported by Invest NI. So the response that has come back there is pretty clear. Invest NI does consider print companies to be part of the manufacturing sector. So if members are content that we forward this to the print industry representative for information, just Phil, you want to come in?
Maybe we should try and get clarity from Invest NI as to whether there was a change in policy over the last 9 years, or whether Dominic had been misadvised, or what the story was. Just
right. Okay, that's grand. Happy enough to.
And are we sharing this answer with?
Yes, that's just recommend that we pass it on to them.
Yeah. In case they want to comment on it.
Okay.
Though it does point to other hurdles, Chair.
Okay, and further to that, more briefing by the print industry at page 107. It's correspondence from Independent News and Media Limited inviting the committee to visit the offices of Belfast Telegraph to meet with the senior editor, editorial and commercial staff in the business. And the visit has been arranged for Thursday the 23rd. Okay.
Is there a time for that, Patsy? No.
I think we're trying to adjust the time here to suit members. Is it 11? Right. 11 o'clock.
Somebody let us know.
But you'll be notified anyway.
Next week then?
Will do you? October. October. Would you mind taking over, Phil? Thanks. Okay.
Fred, I'd like to say.
So you do matter to reason. Members, page 108 of correspondence from the Department of Finance and Personnel in relation to the committee's query and the publishing of tourism statistics. I had raised this issue because it seems to be taking an awful long time to get statistics from the Department of Visitor numbers compared with the CSO in the south. And it still seems to be that there is a problem here, but I don't think we're going to get any progress from them. Members, any comments? No. Content to note?
Keep pushing.
Great. Page 109 is correspondence from the department regarding the committee's request to the department for a copy of all correspondence between the department and Tambourne as far back as the first item of correspondence. There's a substantive piece of correspondence there from the department on how they want to handle commercially sensitive documents when providing the committee with information, and they've asked whether this proposed course of action dealing with the information is acceptable to the committee. So our members agreed to proceed as the way the department has outlined in dealing with those documents.
Agreed.
Sure, just one point on that. My understanding of the environmental information regulations is that where information can be separated and redacted due to it being sort of commercially sensitive, that the rest of information still should be made available through freedom of information or publicly through our committee. So, we've got restricted papers here today, and I'm aware of a freedom of information request that's been refused for applications for consents to drill. Now it's outright, no, you can't have this information. It would appear, I would find it very hard to believe that all that information would be commercially sensitive, and same with the restricted papers that we have. So could we perhaps get from the department clarification that they're applying the rules of the environmental information regulations stringently?
So do you want to wait until we get all the other information, until you see clarification as to whether they can provide us with redacted copies of the information they're completely refusing to give us?
Well, I think putting that point to them when in relation to any request we make for information.
Members happy enough with that approach?
Chair, they do make reference to environmental information regulations in their correspondence.
We do so.
Yeah,
the department considers above documents to be exempt from disclosure under those regulations.
Stephen's just making the point that the way he's read the regulations is the whole document shouldn't be excluded, but the relevant sections that they feel should be excluded should be. So I think Stephen's suggesting that we seek clarity from the department as to whether the whole document should be excluded or just sections of it that they think is commercially relevant or commercially sensitive.
I don't believe it's necessary.
Well, I think people would see it as a reasonable request from the committee. Let the department explain whether they can respond on that basis or not, and if not, what the grounds are.
I'm simply asking, are they correctly applying European law? Because if they're not, they're in breach of European law. So,
sorry, just on that point, is that holding up other information that would otherwise come?
Well, I think there'll be
that query specifically on that.
Well, that's for the committee to decide. What do you want to do? Do you want to get all the information from Tamborden and there'll be a session here where...
Without escalating this, I think we should just ask them, can they provide the full documentation trail, if necessary, through redaction of the commercially sensitive information? Because that's what we asked for in the first instance.
Members agreed?
Mm-hmm.
You happy enough with that, right?
Agreed, we'll live with that.
Sorry, so that's just for clarification, to agree that to accept the documents that are before forwarded and ask for them, and also to ask to seek clarity on whether the whole document should be excluded or whether under EU law a redacted version can be applied, or sorry, supplied. That's fine.
Members agreed?
Yes.
Page 112 is a response from the department to the committee's request for information why CHX Capital LLC had withdrawn its application for a petroleum licence. You'll find that at page 112. Members, any comments?
Noted.
Noted, Gordon. You think it's not that important that they pulled out because of the opposition that's there to hydraulic fracturing at the minute?
Doesn't say that, Chair.
Does not?
it says, although not relevant to CHX Capitals LLC's proposed exploration programme under PL 113, the company felt the concerns raised by Fraction had the potential to affect their own exploration efforts.
Noted.
Noted, Gordon.
Move on. I agree. Noted.
Members, of page 114 is a paper from the department providing an update on the current activities relating to petroleum licences presently with the department as requested by the committee. At page 118 is correspondence from the department informing the committee that Provident Resources formally notified the department on the 12th of August the company has decided to relinquish its petroleum licence PL 510, which covers Rathlin Island in the Rathlin Basin. And at page 142 is a response from the Department of the Environment to the committee's request for information on the current activities of the company's granted petroleum licences. Members, any comments? Content a note?
Yeah.
Thanks, sir.
At its meeting on the 3rd of July 2014, the committee gave the chairperson authority to approve the SL1 on renewable heat incentive after clarification from the department received on two issues. So at page 145, you'll find the response from the department on the two issues, and the committee has approved the SL1. Members, any comments, or are you content to note?
Noted.
Further for your information, tabled today is an answer to a written question on the renewable heat incentive, which was tabled by our former colleague in the committee, Stephen Moodley. Members, any comments on that? Are you happy enough? At page 146 is correspondence
Moody.
2 or 4 activation energy from the regulator, 2 activation energy from the regulator regarding demand side participation. Members content to note.
Great.
Page 148 is responses from a range of departments to the committee's request for written briefings following the energy efficiency workshop with the Green Investment Bank that the committee held on the 10th of June 2014. Are members content to forward the responses to the Green Investment Bank for their information?
Great.
Yeah. Any comments? No. At its meeting on the 3rd of July, the committee considered a report from Invest NI Scientific Services team regarding the Lowlands Health and Energy Limited Connacht Carbon Neutral CHP and Ballinatherapy project. That's such a long name for a project. The committee asked the department forward a copy of the report written by the Invest NI Scientific Services team to the individuals to which it related, and a copy of the letter sent from the department is at page 160 for your information. Are members any comments?
No.
Members content to note?
Yeah.
Page 161, you'll find a table showing all outstanding issues that the committee is currently waiting on from the department. There are now 4 items outstanding. There are now 4 items outstanding as a response has been received from the department regarding intelligent energy systems. This has been tabled today and will be considered under agenda item 18. If members wish, the committee office can keep an eye up an up-to-date table on the ECP system for members' information. Members, any comments you're content to note?
Great.
The committee has previously asked Invest NI for a copy of the report on the availability of Grade A office accommodation. The department has now informed the committee that the report has not yet been finalised. Invest NI is currently considering a second draft of the report and hope to reply to the consultants later this month. Members content to note? Agenda item number 6.
Sorry, before we move on, Chair, can I raise 2 issues? The one issue, if we can take you back to the table paper from Stephen Mitry about the undomestic renewable heat incentive scheme. I am very aware that a lot of these applications would be and could be broader houses, property. And this is in connection with going for growth with regards to advancement and the need for 400 odd houses. Now, if these broader houses aren't built in Northern Ireland, they'll be built in England. I'm not saying that there should be carte blanche approval right across the board. Obviously, there's planning issues and there's also Environment Agency issues. But what I do know is that Environment Agency are using a calculating module or mechanical operation to measure the volume of odour and also the other chemical, which I just have lost, ammonia. Yeah. Those 2 elements, E&A, the Environment Agency are there to make sure that they don't go over a certain threshold. And then that gives them approval then to go forward in the planning and build more houses and expand. But with this renewable heat incentive and with the technology comes with it, the heating system is remote from the broader houses, which means then that there's not an increase in ammonia and odour. But they still are adding a very basic formula, adding that a house produces so much ammonia. And then it means that there's blockages along the line where broader men cannot expand. Could we write to the Deputy Minister to see if she has detected any problems in this, in the advancement of this, and then somehow get to the DOE Minister asking what method does the Environment Agency use to calculate ammonia and odour, and how do they implant into that system the new technology that is biomass, because biomass creates the energy remotely from the houses, which does not increase ammonia levels.
Members are happy enough with that approach?
Yeah, the second issue is yes, it's the operation of this.
Sorry, before we go into clarity, it's to write to both the Minister for Enterprise and the Minister for Environment at this stage, or is one dependent on the other?
No,
just
we can write to both if we want. I'm just not sure we can write to the Environment Minister without going to the
Chief
committee.
Executive of the Environment Agency, right? Okay. And write to him or her too.
So if you want to come back to me, Jim, on that, the specifics, I'll be able to get you more detail, which I don't have in front of me. But the second issue was more about operational. We spent maybe, half an hour, 40 minutes going through matters arising there. Now, I know we're only back from our summer recess, and I know that next week there'll only be 2, 3, 4 items. But would it be possible that after our index sheet, matters arising with all the agenda items on it, that our next sheet would be a suggested items grid, whereby there would be a list of suggested items, whether it is to note, whether it is to write asking for clarification, whether it is to for some other action. And then we would be able to see that obviously in our packs. It wouldn't stop or exclude members bringing and raising things up, but it would stop the chair having to recite every single item on this agenda. And I'm wondering, could we trial that for a period to see how
Members happy enough?
it puts a wee bit more onus.
Need action.
Yes, there should be a suggested action. Now, it's up to the members whether we agree with that suggested action or whether we want to pursue something specific. But it just means that it would be slicker and quicker, and instead of 40 minutes going through matters arising and correspondence, we could maybe have it done within.
But in the interest of transparency and accountability, do we not need to at least discuss in some way the fact that we've got a piece of correspondence here from Stephen Moutry on an AQW that he's tabled?
That's reflected.
It would be table papers would be different because we wouldn't have seen them. But we should have.
But I don't mean for us, I mean for people that might have nothing better to do apart from watch this committee meeting. They might have an interest in what we're talking about.
No, because it will still be on our papers.
The papers aren't published, you see.
Right, okay, well
the pack's not uploaded online, so if we don't discuss something, it's never discussed in here, if you know what I mean. So that'd be my concern.
The way it would operate, I suppose, is would come to matters arising, agenda 5, and the chair would ask, is everybody content with the suggested actions? And then it would be up to us as members to say, no, I'm not happy, or I want to discuss agenda item number 5.8. And then you would bring that conversation.
Well, we'll do a trial next week, wouldn't we?
If you wish.
Members agreed?
Now, it puts more onus on the part because they're having to.
I know you're trying to speed up matters arising here. It's not really working for you.
They're trying to suggest the actions, but I think it would work. It works in our committees.
Chair, I'm on the committee, the same thing happens because the chair goes down a list of things and he said, look, is there anything else you want to bring up? And bring it up. And you're saying about people out there, the things we're talking about, people wouldn't be able to sit down anyway, I don't think. Some of the stuff, possibly.
Jim told me 4 times since you started talking to somebody, there's a huge amount to get through. Poor Jim's getting anxious here. Right, agenda item number 6.
I'm going 2 minutes.
You're going 2? I'm going 2. Agenda item 6, subordinate legislation, SR 2014-198, the Energy Efficiency Regulations 2014. Papers for this item are page 162. This rule is subject to negative resolution. The committee discussed the rule at SL1 stage at the meeting of the 29th of May when members agreed with the policy implications and the rule came into operation on the 25th of July. Are members content with the statutory rule? So the Committee for Enterprise, Trade and Investment has considered SR 2014-198, the Energy Efficiency Regulation 2014, and has no objection to the rule. Agenda item number 7. Agenda item number 7, the written briefing from DETI on the implementation of the EU Directive on Alternative Dispute Resolution for Consumer Disputes. This paper is at your table papers and includes a response from the Department detailing the level of consultation and correspondence from the Consumer Council. The Department states that DFP is in the lead in liaising with BIS on the matter. Are members content to write to DFP to ask why have the lead given that this is a consumer issue and to ask for their views on the concerns of the Consumer Council? And are members content to forward to the Consumer Council for comment to let them know the committee's action? Agenda item number 8, Assembly Research year-end surges in departmental expenditure. The Committee for Finance and Personnel has provided the Committee with a copy of the paper by Assembly Research and year-end surges in departmental expenditure, and this is on page 188. Members, any comments with regards to the DETI capital outcome and resource outcome, or he's happy enough to note? Agenda item number 9, there's a written briefing from the regulator on the possible cancellation of generating unit agreements. So their regulator's market update paper is at page 250 and includes a summary of responses to the consultation. And at page 257 is a position paper from Manufacturing NI. The committee has asked that a decision not be made by the regulator until the committee had the opportunity to review the summary of responses, and the regulator, when providing the market update, informed the committee that the board of the regulator was scheduled to make a decision on the possible cancellation of the remaining GUAs at its meeting on the 12th of September. The utility regulator has since informed the committee the decision by the board is not expected to be published until early October 2014. Members, any comments or have enough to note?
Noted.
Are we going to write?
The utility regulator has asked that the committee and asked the utility regulator to wait. So are members content enough at this stage to write to the utility regulator and say the committee is content with the cancellation of the generating unit agreements as proposed by them?
No.
Or do members want...
We're content that stakeholders have been given an opportunity to feed into the consultation. I don't think we should take a view on it. That'll be my reading of it.
Yeah.
Members happy enough?
Yeah, can we just ask for further piece of information as well, and I don't think it affects the decision we've just made. The key thing that strikes me here is obviously the utility regulator was content with this GEA and has since changed his mind. It's really what unexpected outcomes materialised from the GEA.
Members agree? Agenda item number 10, there's a written briefing from the regulator which is an analysis of the allocation of network and other related costs between grid customer groups and across jurisdictions, and you'll find this at page 261. Have members any comments? Are members content to ask the regulator what the next steps will be following publication of the report?
Great.
Agenda item number 11, there's a consultation on Superfast Rollout Programme Phase 2 project. Papers to this item are page 323 and include a letter from the Minister and the consultation document. Members content to note? If there's any comments, are they happy to receive a summary of responses following the consultation?
Great.
Agenda item number 12, end of session report. You'll find this page 342. Members, any comments? And he is content for the end of session report to be published in the committee pages of the website.
Which includes our photograph today.
Sure it will, Sammy. Sure it will. Agenda item 13, correspondence. You'll find papers for this at page 350. You've correspondence from the Culture, Arts and Leisure Committee inviting the Chair and Deputy Chair to hear the BBC Director General speak at an event in Parliament Buildings at 11 in the morning in room 115 on the 1st of October.
Great.
A copy of the invitation to the Minister is included at page 353. Myself and Patsy are unable to attend due to prior engagement. From the Committee for the Office of the First and Deputy First Minister, providing information on its inquiry into building a united community at page 355. Any comments? Have enough? Committee for...
Sorry, sure, I need something. Well, it's just, I suppose, to ask the department for any comment on the department's role, and I'm thinking particularly around sectarianism and racism in the workplace.
Members have enough? There's correspondence from the Committee for Agriculture and Rural Development at page 359, providing a copy of the official report of its meeting with the Loughney Cross-Departmental Working Group report. Members content to note? From the Department at page 367, informing the Committee of a consultation by DEC on a proposal to introduce criminal sanctions for insider dealing and market manipulation in energy markets. A copy of the consultation document is available from the Committee Office if anybody has a desire to see it. Members, any comments you have enough to note? From the Minister at page 368 to inform the Committee of a forthcoming consultation by DEC on a proposal to revise the IME3 legislation relating to the certification of transmission system owners, or TSOs most of us call them, as complying with the IME3 ownership unbundling rules. The Minister has agreed to include the North in the call for comments paper and will be circulated to stakeholders locally. Are members content with the Minister's approach? From the Department at page 369, advising the Committee of the Minister's intention to seek a legislative consent motion in respect of a number of measures in the Small Business, Enterprise and Employment Bill. Members content with the Department's approach? From the Department at page 370, that's Gordon Dunn's back in Arlene Foster to the Hill Turrigancy. From the Department at page 373 concerning its response to an FOI request in the Presbyterian Mutual Society. Members, any comments? Are you happy enough to note?
Noted.
Members, content to note the remaining items of correspondence? Noted. Agenda item number 14, the forward work programme. You'll find this on page 386. It was proposed that if the 7th of October meetings will be held on Tuesday mornings in room 29. However, as another committee has already booked this room for the 21st of October, that committee meeting will be held in the Senate chamber. Members content with that approach? Included in your papers are meeting requests from Action Renewables at page 397 regarding proposals to reduce the ROC levels for small-scale solar PV, and from the Ulster Farmers Union regarding grid connection at page 403. The committee may wish to consider scheduled oral briefings from both organisations, and the committee may also wish to consider an appropriate time and issue to schedule a briefing from the Minister.
Any oral briefing?
Have we enough?
Yeah,
we may wish to consider scheduling an oral briefing. It's fairly non-committal, but we're happy enough with that approach.
Just on that, Chair, a number of us have had meetings with the utility regulator. There's been quite a bit of work done in relation to connections and working with NIE. Some progress has been made on that, so maybe it'd be worth talking to her or having her come in here to update us on those issues.
Well, the inquiries continued, so I presume we'll hear from her in due course on it.
Following the query.
Is she planning to attend, Chair? Regulator or schedule?
Regulator or the Minister?
Sorry, the regulator?
The regulator isn't scheduled, however, next week there is a decision on the integrated single electricity market, so members might want to, having considered that at next week's meeting, it's very complex, so members might want to schedule a briefing from the regulator on that.
Yes.
At an early date, so maybe that's, having read the papers next week, make a decision then.
We're happy enough?
Okay, thank you.
However, in relation to why I had suggested the members might want Action Renewables in is that the solar PV has been reduced considerably, so members might want to get a view on that. And also in relation to the Ulster Farmers Union, the Ulster Farmers Union had come to committee with the issue of microgrids, which could provide relevant, useful information for the review. So it would be worth scheduling them, and I think they're happy enough to come along next week, and there is a slot if members are content with that.
Problem will live in your hands, Jim. Paul?
Yeah. On this review of the ROCs for solar, to me this is a big issue. Some similar to what we've been through industrial-wise, but I think this is more stark and more of an issue. To reduce ROCs levels from 4 to 1.6. We know that there has to be a good suitable debate on this, because we will be given time, though this is a consultation, we'll be getting the findings of the consultation surely, and then we'll have a debate on this, so there will be time to discuss this. Isn't that right? Hopefully.
You'd like to think so?
But there is another issue, and it's the fact that, well, there's two issues. The reason why you have so many of these solar panels going up on people's roofs is because of the rent a roof issue. And there's going to be major problems for that down the line, whereby there's now, when you go to sell your house, there's a third party involved. Now that is different from domestic users getting and obtaining the ROCs themselves. There's about 33 installers in this country, all based locally, and they are going to feel the pressure because they feel that loopholes are going to be, the ROCs are going to be reduced to stop this rent-a-roof business. Now, there's a loophole in this system whereby people can cold call you, knock your door, and ask you to rent your roof basically to these companies. These companies then sell these roofs on to a company which is outside of Northern Ireland, a global company, and they basically band them on thousands of roofs together, and that allows them then to get the industrial rate with regards to ROCs. That is a loophole that needs to be closed. And I believe if that loophole was to be closed, then that would have a difference in the ROCs level, because you wouldn't then have to fight against that through the ROCs. You would just be closing a loophole. Now, I don't know if legally you can do that, but I think that's something we need to be looking at. And I would be keen to ask these providers questions around this. That there is a massive issue. The second issue in this is that when people apply for ROCs to PRNI, and you have a provider there who are going to install these, and they then register your ROCs with the PRNI, whenever the domestic customer or business phones up PRNI to see what's taking so long with the ROCs, they tell the people that they haven't even been registered, whenever the company has registered them months and months ago. And the reason for that is there's about 4,000 piles of applications sitting on paper which have not yet been transferred on a computer system. So when you ring up reception in PRNI, they look up the computer system and you're not on it because you're simply sitting on a pile of paper. And that is unacceptable, and it's holding up delays in people obtaining ROCs, and it's messing up with their business plans. So there's two issues that we really need to be getting to grips with.
Well, I think probably the Action Renewables people, because I separately have had representations from some people that work in this sector who are very, very concerned about job losses.
Yeah.
And so I think, and Action Renewables, we've had them in here before, they're very good at what they do and very informative, and really the experience before was that they stripped away and explained to us basically what the issues were. So members are happy enough that we get Action Renewables and the UFU in on two separate issues, okay? And it may well be that how we're informed and the issues, including those, Paul, that you've raised, if we could consider an appropriate time to schedule a meeting with the Minister around this and other issues.
Well,
it's not about this issue.
Yeah, I know oral briefings will take up chunks of our forward work programme, which we'll need to be careful about, but even if we write in advance to the Minister or the department asking for their thoughts on those two issues. The issues.
We'd probably have the briefings first of all. But,
yeah, right, okay, yeah.
You know, so that we're best informed, because it's through that we'll hear.
I have to go now, but I just want to make a point. The Forward Work Programme, I think it's about the 18th, we're planning stuff in there, of 18th of November, and the European Innovation Summit is that week. So all I'm saying is I think we need to make a decision fairly quick, you know, in terms about it looks, because the whole range of those issues pertain to what the work that we're doing as well.
We had a meeting out there.
Yeah.
All right, so thank you. Okay. To inform members then, so we've agreed then to meet with Action Renewables and the UFU, and subsequent to that to consider an appropriate time and issue to schedule a briefing from the Minister as well. Okay, agreed. To inform members then, page 1 or item 129 on the agenda item 14. We're still in the Forward Work Programme. In the papers today is information on EU events at page 407, and tabled today is information on the Innovation Summit, which members requested last week. Now, just so when we heard earlier, we're going to get further details around that particular summit to see what benefit and use it might be to us. Then, at this point in time, Jim, you have some preparatory work done around the issue of corporation tax, which we spent a considerable amount of time on last week, so there's no need to really reopen it again about potential for an inquiry on corporation tax, which may be given added impetus by events elsewhere. We're referring a lot to Scotland today, but events elsewhere in Scotland. So, Jim, you have a suggested approach there worked out for the committee. So do you want to give us an overview of it there, please?
It was sort of an initial thought to have, and I've had a meeting with Assembly Research on this, to look at getting research on the issues in the first instance, to decide, to get them to research the key issues for businesses coming to Northern Ireland of what they are looking for, and then further research on how Northern Ireland is currently performing in relation to each of those key issues. A comparison about how corporation tax, low corporation tax has impacted on other jurisdictions. I know jurisdictions such as, of course, the Republic of Ireland, the Azores, Bulgaria, Cyprus, that have lower corporation tax, to see what the impact has been there. And then look at what work needs to be done then to address the performance gaps. You know, in each of the decisions that are considered key. So research are happy enough to take that on board. They say they're happy enough if the committee wants, they'll draw up a proposal for that, and they'll actually put one of the bursary students onto it as well. Good. And I suggested too that they liaise with our specialist advisor on that in the process. So if that's a approach the committee would be happy to take in the first instance.
Okay. Good. What would be the time frame for that?
I agree with that approach. I just remember when I was first on this committee, we got quite a useful, I think it was a research paper on corporation tax, and it looked at different corporation tax levels across Europe, and it included those who went for low corporation tax, but also, when I remember, Sweden and etc. having sort of fairly the higher levels of corporation tax, and it would be good to get that alongside that. I know that's a bit vague. It was a few years ago.
No, well, it's not actually, because it's something that was discussed with research. They do have a considerable body of existing research on corporation tax, which they will use to inform the research that they're going to do for the committee. So. Okay,
but even if we're just emailed the links or whatever. That would be.
I know, just by way of some sort of feedback, I was talking briefly to one of what would refer to the stakeholders out there, the FSB, Federation of Small Business People, and suggesting that we were taking this course of action. They were very excited about it and anxious to become involved and help with us too. So, excuse me, I think it'd be a very, very useful body of work.
So you asked about the timescale. So yes. It is a considerable body of work, and there'll be a lot of resource put to it, and probably questionnaires developed and that sort of thing. So you're probably talking sometime around December before it's completed. Right. You know, it's a long-term project.
Good. Okay, right. That's grand, thanks. So members are content and happy enough with that. It might be useful, Jim, if your briefing document could be shared with members as well.
That was just for my own information.
Oh, that's your own. All right. Okay, that's grand. All right. We've dealt with that. Now, then we move to on this. There's any further stuff here? I'm at agenda item number 15, any other business? There have been no other additional items of business. Before we move to closed session, just in case people get scooted out the door very quickly there. The date, time and place of the next meeting will be this day week, room 30 at 10 a.m. Now, can we move to closed session then?